The night Elara Vance watched her sister steal her words, she knew someone would pay in blood, or reputation. In a world where beauty bought survival and silence bought safety, she'd made the fatal mistake of being brilliant instead of pretty. Now the most dangerous man in England sat in her crumbling drawing room, hunting for a bride, and Elara held a secret that could destroy them all. One wrong move, one slip of the tongue, and the house of cards she'd built would collapse, taking everyone she'd ever protected down with it. If you want to see how far desperation can push someone, how a girl with nothing can gamble everything, stick around. Drop a comment with your city. I want to know how far this story travels. And hit that like button because you're about to witness something brutal. The east wing of Vance House smelled like rot. Not the obvious kind, not garbage or decay that anyone could point to and fix. This was the insidious rot of old money dying slowly, of wallpaper peeling in the corners where guests wouldn't look, of debts piling up in locked drawers, of desperation masked by the last few pieces of good silver. Elara Vance knew every inch of that rot. She'd been cataloging it for 3 years. Mother needs the rosewater. Her sister's voice drifted down from upstairs, high and careless. The French kind, not the cheap rubbish from the apothecary. Elara didn't look up from the household ledger spread across the kitchen table. The numbers didn't improve when she ignored them. 17 pounds, 4 shillings left. The butcher's bill alone was 19. Elara, did you hear me? We can't afford French rosewater. Elara kept her voice flat, factual. Emotion was wasted on Callista. We can barely afford candles. The rustle of silk announced her sister's arrival before Callista appeared in the doorway, luminous even in the dim morning light. At 19, she'd perfected the art of looking ethereal in last season's gowns. It was a gift Elara had never possessed, being able to make poverty look romantic instead of pathetic. Then make it work. Callista's smile was sugar with teeth behind it. That's what you do, isn't it? Make things work. You're so terribly clever with all your little calculations. 23 years old and relegated to the kitchen like a particularly useful servant. That was Elara's position in the Vance family hierarchy. Invisible when convenient, indispensable when needed. I can dilute the lavender water we have left. Elara closed the ledger before Callista could see the real numbers. She won't know the difference. See? Clever. Callista plucked an apple from the bowl, their last 3, meant to last the week, and bit into it with perfect white teeth. Shame cleverness doesn't count for much, really. Not where it matters. The unspoken hung between them like smoke. Not where men were concerned, not where marriage was concerned, not where survival was concerned, not for girls who looked like Elara, all harsh angles and serious eyes, dark hair that wouldn't hold a curl, a mouth set in permanent skepticism. The world had looked at the Vance sisters and decided which one deserved investment. Callista got the nice gowns, the music lessons, the strategic invitations. Elara got the account books and the task of making 17 pounds stretch across 19 pounds worth of necessities. The Duke of Ashford arrives at 4. Their mother's voice cut through the kitchen before she appeared, already dressed in her best day gown, the peacock blue one they'd had altered twice to stay current. Lady Minerva Vance had once been a great beauty. Now she wore that former beauty like armor, polished and displayed and increasingly irrelevant. Callista, you'll wear the cream muslin, the one with the Brussels lace. It's being mended. Elara kept her tone neutral. The lace tore at the Whitmore ball. Then unmend it and remend it properly. Her mother's eyes swept over Elara with the dismissive efficiency of someone cataloging furniture. You'll serve tea, quietly. The Duke doesn't need to be bothered with a vague gesture at Elara's entire existence. Distractions. Of course. Distractions. That's what they called her now. Once, when their father was alive and the money still flowed, she'd been the promising daughter, the one who read philosophy and could discuss estate management. Then he died. The investments had collapsed, and promising became inconvenient, unmarriageable, a drain on resources. This is critical, Elara. Her mother moved closer, and for the first time that morning actually looked at her, really looked. The Duke of Ashford is the most eligible man in England, wealthy beyond measure, impeccable lineage. If Callista can secure his interest, we survive, Elara finished. I understand. Do you? Something sharp flickered in her mother's eyes. Desperation, maybe. Or fear. Do you understand that if we don't make an advantageous match before autumn, we lose the house? That the creditors are circling? That your aunt has already said she won't take us in unless we come as servants? Elara understood. She understood exactly. She was the one hiding bills, negotiating with tradesmen, selling off pieces of silver one at a time to keep them fed. Her mother and Callista floated through their days in willful ignorance, preserving the beautiful illusion. Elara lived in the rot, managed the rot, was the rot. I'll make sure everything is perfect. Elara stood, tucking the ledger under her arm. The drawing room, the tea service, Callista's dress, all of it. Her mother's face softened slightly. Gratitude, maybe, or just relief at having someone competent to delegate to. You're a good girl, Elara. Dependable. Dependable. The kiss of death for daughters. Beautiful girls got married. Dependable girls got used. By 3 o'clock, the drawing room looked almost convincing. Elara had positioned the good furniture to hide the threadbare patches in the carpet. Fresh flowers, picked from the garden, because buying them was impossible, brightened the corners. She'd polished the silver tea service until it gleamed, disguising the fact that they'd sold half the pieces last winter. The illusion of wealth. That's what they were selling today. Stop fidgeting. Elara adjusted the lace at Callista's shoulder for the third time. You look beautiful. I know. Callista studied herself in the mirror with the clinical assessment of someone evaluating a business asset, which Elara supposed was exactly what this was. But is it devastatingly beautiful? The Duke has seen 1,000 pretty faces. Then don't rely on your face. The words came out sharper than intended. Callista's eyes met hers in the reflection. What else do I have? The question landed like a slap. Because it was true, wasn't it? They'd raised Callista to be ornamental, beautiful, charming, agreeable. She could play the pianoforte adequately and make insipid conversation about weather and fashion. She'd never balanced an account book, never negotiated with a creditor, never stayed up until dawn figuring out how to make nothing stretch into something. That was Elara's job, being useful in ways that didn't matter. You have enough. Elara stepped back. Just smile, laugh at his jokes, let him talk about himself. Men love that. You sound like you know. Callista turned, curious now. Have you ever even spoken to a man? I mean, really spoken to one, not just... She waved a hand vaguely. Transactions with tradesmen. Had she? Real conversations, the kind where ideas were exchanged instead of coins or courtesies? Once, maybe. Her father used to discuss books with her, philosophy, politics. But he'd been dead 4 years, and his voice had faded to an echo she couldn't quite recall anymore. It doesn't matter what I know. Elara moved toward the door. This isn't about me. No. Callista's reflection watched her leave. It never is. The Duke of Ashford arrived at precisely 4 o'clock. Elara watched from the kitchen corridor as he stepped into their entrance hall. A man who didn't walk through spaces so much as command them. Tall, dark-haired, with the kind of face that would have been handsome if it weren't so carefully controlled. Everything about him screamed calculation. The perfectly tailored coat, the measured movements, the way his eyes swept the room, cataloging, assessing, finding every flaw. This was a man who missed nothing. Dangerous. Your Grace. Her mother's voice hit that perfect note of deference mixed with dignity. What an honor. May I present my daughter, Miss Callista Vance. Callista curtsied with practiced grace, her smile warm but not too warm, interested but not desperate. Perfect performance. Years of training crystallized into this single moment. The Duke bowed, said something polite. His face revealed nothing. Elara retreated to the kitchen, checking the tea preparations one final time. Earl Grey, their last decent tea, saved for exactly this occasion. Small cakes she'd made herself at dawn because the bakery bill was unpaid. Strawberries from the garden, arranged to look abundant when there were barely a dozen. Smoke and mirrors. Their whole life was smoke and mirrors now. Tea is ready. She loaded the tray carefully, balancing weight and appearance. The drawing room hummed with polite conversation when she entered, her mother discussing the weather. Callista laughing at something the Duke had said, a light, musical laugh that sounded genuine even though Elara knew she'd practiced it. No one looked at her as she set down the tray. That was the point. Invisible servants blended into the wallpaper. The gardens must be lovely this time of year. The Duke's voice was deep, controlled, every word precisely chosen. Do you ride, Miss Vance? Oh, I adore riding. Callista poured tea with elegant efficiency. Though we've had to... She caught herself. Almost mentioned selling the horses. We've been so busy with social obligations, I haven't had time lately. Smooth recovery. Elara felt a flicker of pride despite herself. A shame. The Duke accepted his teacup. I find writing clarifies the mind, particularly difficult philosophical questions. Callista's smile didn't waver, but Elara saw the flicker of panic in her eyes. Philosophy. Not the weather, not fashion. Her sister could navigate social niceties brilliantly, but abstract concepts? They'd never bothered teaching her those. Philosophy. Callista repeated the word like she was buying time. Yes, quite. The silence stretched too long. I imagine Miss Vance refers to Rousseau's concept of nature as moral teacher. The words left Elara's mouth before she could stop them. 3 pairs of eyes swiveled toward her. That physical pursuits in natural settings provide clarity unavailable in artificial social constructs. The Duke's gaze fixed on her, really looked at her, for the first time. His eyes were gray, storm cloud gray, and entirely too sharp. Precisely. He set down his teacup. Though one might argue Rousseau oversimplifies, nature can be as brutal as any drawing room. More honest in its brutality, perhaps. Elara felt her mother's warning glare, but couldn't seem to stop. At least in nature, you know a wolf when you see one. The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. And in drawing rooms? Wolves wear much better tailoring. Her mother made a strangled sound. Callista stared at her like she'd sprouted a second head. This was wrong, all wrong. She was supposed to be invisible, forgettable. Instead, she'd just insulted the most powerful man in England to his face. But the Duke laughed, actually laughed. A genuine sound of surprised amusement that transformed his carefully controlled face into something almost human. Well, he stood, and everyone else scrambled to stand with him. This has been infinitely more interesting than expected. Lady Vance, Miss Vance, a nod to Callista. Thank you for your hospitality. He moved toward the door, and Elara felt relief flood through her. They'd survived. Barely. Callista could still... The Duke paused at the threshold, turning back. His eyes found Elara's again, and something electric passed between them. Recognition, maybe. Or challenge. I don't believe I caught your name. Elara. Her mouth was dry. Elara Vance. Miss Elara Vance. He inclined his head slightly. A pleasure to meet someone who speaks their mind. It's remarkably rare. Then he was gone, leaving behind a silence that felt like the moment before an explosion. Her mother moved first. What were you thinking? I'm sorry. You insulted him, compared him to a wolf, in his face. He laughed. Elara heard the defensiveness in her own voice. He seemed what? Charmed by the awkward spinster who can't keep her opinions to herself? Her mother's face had gone scarlet. This was Callista's chance, her only chance, and I helped. Elara's temper, usually so carefully controlled, started to fray. She didn't know what to say. I gave her an opening. You drew his attention away from her. You made yourself visible when you should have been. What? Invisible? Silent? Useful, but unobtrusive? The words burst out before she could contain them. I'm sorry, I actually know things. Sorry I've read books instead of just learning to simper prettily. Callista flinched. You're jealous. Her mother's voice dropped to something cold and cutting. You've always been jealous of your sister, of her beauty, her grace, her ignorance. Elara heard herself saying it, couldn't stop herself. The fact that she's been raised to be decorative instead of functional, that she can't balance an account book or negotiate with creditors or do anything except look lovely and agree with men. That's enough. No, it's not. Something was breaking open inside her. Years of silence, of swallowing resentment, of making herself small. You want to know what I think? I think you've wasted Callista. Turned her into a commodity instead of a person. And for what? So she can marry some calculating duke who's shopping for a wife the way he'd shop for a horse? Pretty, pedigreed, and biddable? Her mother slapped her. The crack of it echoed in the drawing room. Elara's cheek burned, but she didn't touch it, didn't give them the satisfaction. Go to your room. Her mother's voice shook, and don't come out until you remember your place. Elara went. Her room was in the attic. Of course it was. The smallest room in the house, with a single window that stuck when it rained and a door that didn't quite close properly. They'd moved her up here 2 years ago, when they'd needed her old bedroom to convert into a storage room for things they couldn't sell yet. She sat on the narrow bed and let herself shake. The slap didn't hurt. Not really. What hurt was the truth of it, that she was jealous, not of Callista's beauty, but of her certainty. Her sister knew what she was for, knew her value, her role, her purpose. Elara was just useful, necessary, unwanted, the forgotten daughter in the attic. A scratch at the door made her look up. Callista slipped inside, closing it carefully behind her. She's still angry. Her sister perched on the edge of the bed, keeping distance between them. Said you've probably ruined everything. I know. Have you? Callista's voice was small. Ruined it? I don't know. They sat in silence. The afternoon light through the dirty window cast everything in gray. You were right, Callista finally said. About me. What you said downstairs. Kali, no, you were. I am ignorant, decorative. I couldn't tell you the first thing about Rousseau, or estate management, or any of the things you know. She twisted her hands in her lap. Father used to read to you, teach you things. He never did that with me. He tried, Elara remembered. You weren't interested. I was 8. I wanted to play with dolls, not discuss philosophy. Callista's smile was bitter. And everyone said it was fine. Said I was the pretty one, that's all that mattered. You were the clever one, but clever doesn't matter. Not for girls like us, not when we're desperate. The word hung between them. Desperate. That's what they were. What they'd been for years, even if only Elara had been allowed to acknowledge it. I'm sorry, Callista stood. That they make you invisible. That they use you. You deserve better. We all deserve better. Maybe. Her sister moved to the door, paused. The Duke asked about you, after he left. Asked Mother who you were, what you did. Elara's heart stuttered. What did she say? That you were the elder daughter, unmarried, helpful with household matters. Callista's expression was unreadable. He said you were interesting. Mother practically died. Then she was gone, and Elara was alone again with the rot and the silence. The letter arrived 3 days later. Not for Callista, for her mother. But Elara saw the seal, the Duke of Ashford's crest, and felt something twist in her stomach. She watched from the kitchen doorway as her mother opened it, saw the color drain from her face. He's invited us to dinner. Lady Minerva's voice was faint. All of us. Tomorrow night. That's wonderful. Callista clasped her hands together. He must be interested. He specified. Their mother looked up, and her eyes found Elara's across the room. He specifically requested that Miss Elara Vance attend. The world tilted slightly. Why? The word escaped before Elara could think better of it. I don't know. Her mother's face was a complicated mix of confusion, hope, and something that might have been fear. But we're going. All of us. Ashford Hall made Vance House look like a cottage. Elara had known the Duke was wealthy. Everyone knew that. But seeing it was different. The estate stretched for miles, perfectly maintained, with gardens that looked like paintings and staff who moved with the quiet efficiency of a well-oiled machine. Everything Vance House wasn't. Everything they'd lost. This was what Callista was trying to marry into, this world of certainty and abundance. Remember, their mother's whisper was sharp as they approached the entrance. Callista is the focus. You're here as accompaniment. Be polite, be quiet, be invisible. Elara understood. The Duke received them in a drawing room that could have held their entire house. He wore evening dress like armor, every line perfect, every button aligned. But when his eyes found Elara's, something flickered in them. That same electric current from before. Lady Vance. Miss Vance. He greeted Callista first, proper protocol, then turned. Miss Elara, thank you for coming. Your grace, mom. She curtsied, kept her eyes down. Proper deference. Dinner was elaborate, 7 courses, each more complicated than the last. Elara watched Callista navigate it perfectly, her social training evident in every gesture. She laughed at the Duke's stories, asked polite questions, displayed exactly the right amount of interest without seeming forward. Perfect performance. But the Duke's attention kept drifting to Elara. Tell me, Miss Elara. He said it during the 4th course, cutting across some story Callista was telling. What do you think of Milton's interpretation of free will in Paradise Lost? The table went silent. Elara felt her mother's warning glare, felt Callista's confusion. I think, she chose her words carefully. Milton was a brilliant poet and a terrible philosopher. His Eve exercises free will only to be punished for it. His definition of freedom is obedience to a predetermined plan. That's not will. That's theater. Her mother made a choking sound. The Duke leaned forward, gray eyes intent. You don't believe in divine order? I believe in power structures dressed as morality. The words kept coming, dangerous and unstoppable. The powerful always claim their position is natural, ordained, inevitable. Milton's God is just that, power justifying itself through narrative. And Satan? The only honest character in the poem. At least he admits what he wants. You sympathize with the devil? I sympathize with anyone who refuses to pretend their cage is freedom. The silence that followed felt explosive. Elara realized she'd gone too far, said too much, revealed too much. This was why they kept her in the attic. This was why. The Duke smiled. Really smiled, like she'd passed some test. Remarkable. He sat back. Absolutely remarkable. Her mother looked faint. Callista looked betrayed. But the Duke looked satisfied, like he'd found exactly what he'd been searching for. And Elara felt the first stirring of real fear. Because she understood suddenly. This wasn't about Callista. It had never been about Callista. The Duke hadn't invited them to dinner to court her beautiful sister. He'd invited them to study the forgotten girl in the attic. And Elara had no idea why. The invitation came a week later. Not a social call. A proposition. The Duke wanted a wife. Not for love, he'd been very clear about that. For status, for heirs, for the practical necessities of his position. He was offering a marriage of convenience to one of the Vance daughters. He would provide financial security, clear their debts, restore their position. In exchange, he wanted. Elara stared at the letter in her mother's shaking hands. Intelligence, wit, genuine conversation. Someone who could match his mind. He wanted a partner who could discuss philosophy and estate management. Someone who read. Someone who thought. He wanted everything Callista wasn't. He wanted Elara. This is insane. Her mother's voice was barely audible. He's a duke, one of the most powerful men in England, and he wants the unmarriageable daughter. Elara finished. The awkward spinster, the one you've been trying to hide. This doesn't make sense. Callista stood by the window, her reflection ghostly in the glass. He could have anyone, any beautiful, accomplished woman in England. Why would he want... She stopped, but the question hung in the air anyway. Why would he want you? Elara didn't have an answer, or rather, she had too many answers, none of them comforting. Maybe he was eccentric. Maybe he valued intelligence over beauty, though in her experience, men who claimed that usually meant they wanted both. Maybe this was some elaborate game, some way to humiliate them. Or maybe he was like her, smart enough to see through the performance, tired enough of pretending, desperate enough to try something different. You'll accept. Her mother's voice had gone flat, decisive. Of course you'll accept. Will I? Elara. Her mother actually looked at her, really looked, not through her. This saves us. All of us. The debts, the house, Callista's future, everything. By sacrificing me to a man I don't know and don't trust. Sacrifice. Something almost like fury crossed her mother's face. You're being offered a duchy, status beyond our wildest dreams, a position most women would kill for. That's not sacrifice, that's salvation. Was it? Elara couldn't tell anymore. Her whole life had been sacrifice dressed as duty. This just had better clothing. What if I say no? The question landed like a stone in still water. Her mother's face went cold. Then we lose everything. The house, our reputation, any hope of Callista making a decent match. We become nothing, and it will be your fault. There it was, the cage dressed as choice. Accept the Duke's offer, marry a stranger for strategy instead of love, become the savior she'd never been allowed to be. Or refuse, and watch everything burn. Watch her mother and sister lose everything, live with the knowledge that she'd chosen pride over their survival. Some choice. Elara looked at Callista, still standing by the window. Her beautiful sister who'd been raised to be a duchess, only to watch the forgotten daughter steal her destiny. I'm sorry. Elara's voice came out rough. Callie, Don't. Callista turned, and her face was complex. Envy and relief, and something that might have been love mixed with resentment. Just don't. This was never about what either of us wanted anyway. She was right. It never had been. In this world, daughters were currency, and Elara had just discovered she was worth more than anyone had realized. The question was, what would it cost her to be spent? The engagement was announced in the Times the following week. The Duke of Ashford and Miss Elara Vance to be married in 6 weeks. Society erupted, not with joy or congratulations, but with confusion bordering on scandal. Why would one of England's most eligible bachelors choose the plain, forgotten Vance daughter over her beautiful sister? It made no sense. There must be some explanation, a secret fortune, a hidden connection, something. Elara read the speculation in the scandal sheets her mother tried to hide. Read the barely veiled insults, the confusion, the whispers. Plain Jane catches a duke, but how? Sources close to the family suggest unusual circumstances. Perhaps the Duke of Ashford values household management skills over beauty. That last one made her laugh, a brittle, sharp sound that earned her a concerned look from Callista. You don't have to read those. Why not? Elara folded the paper, creasing it precisely. It's all true. I am plain. I am unmarriageable by conventional standards. I am the unexpected choice. But you're also brilliant, and he sees that. Does he? Elara met her sister's eyes. Or does he see a useful tool? Someone who can manage his estates, provide intelligent conversation, produce heirs with good bloodlines. I'm still a transaction, Callie, just a different type. Callista sat beside her, their shoulders touching. Are you afraid? Terrified. Of him. Of everything. Elara's voice dropped. Of being seen. Of failing to be what he expects. Of succeeding at being what he expects. Of waking up one day and realizing I've spent my whole life being useful to other people and never once to myself. Her sister was quiet for a long moment. Then, run away. Elara laughed. Where? With what money? I'm serious. You could, I don't know, become a governess or a companion. Something. Anything but this. Could she? Walk away from the Duke, from the engagement, from her family's salvation? Let them lose everything while she preserved her freedom? No. She couldn't, because that would be selfish, and Elara had been trained too well in sacrifice. I'm seeing him tomorrow. She changed the subject. Tea at Ashford Hall, just the two of us. Chaperoned? Apparently not. He was very specific. Just us, his library, conversation. Callista's eyes widened. That's not proper. No, Elara smiled without humor. But then, nothing about this engagement is. The library at Ashford Hall was larger than their entire house. Books lined every wall, floor to ceiling, the smell of leather and paper thick enough to taste. Elara stood in the doorway, momentarily overwhelmed. This was wealth. Not money, wealth. The kind that accumulated over generations, that built rooms dedicated to knowledge. Impressive, isn't it? The Duke stood by the window, still wearing that controlled expression, but his shoulders were slightly relaxed, his stance less rigid. This was his space, his comfort. It's extraordinary. Elara moved into the room, drawn to the shelves like gravity. May I? Of course, that's why you're here. She ran her fingers along the spines, first editions, rare volumes, everything from classical philosophy to modern science. There were books here she'd only heard of, never seen, books she'd dreamed of reading. I'm surprised. She pulled out a volume of Wollstonecraft, a vindication of the rights of woman, not standard ducal reading. I like ideas that challenge me. He moved closer. Especially ones I disagree with. Do you? Disagree with her? Parts. Her education arguments have merit, but she underestimates the structural barriers. He took the book, flipped to a specific page like he knew it by heart. Here. She claims education alone can liberate women, but education without economic independence is just elaborate decoration. Elara felt something shift. You've actually read this. Thought about it. Did you expect otherwise? Most men don't. Most men are fools. He returned the book to its shelf. Present company excluded, I hope. Was that humor? It was hard to tell with him. Everything was so controlled, so measured. Why am I here? The question came out more direct than intended. Really, not the official reason, the real one. The Duke studied her for a long moment. Then he moved to a desk, pulled out a chair, not for himself, for her. An oddly courteous gesture. Because I'm tired, he finally said. Tired of performances, of beautiful, vapid women who've been trained to agree with everything I say, of conversations about weather and fashion and nothing of substance. He sat across from her. When you spoke about Milton, about power structures dressed as morality, I realized. You see it too, the game, the theater of it all. That doesn't explain why you want to marry me, doesn't it? His gray eyes were intense. I need a wife. Society demands it. I need heirs, someone to manage my household, represent my interests. But I'll be damned if I spend the rest of my life married to someone I can't have a genuine conversation with. Elara's throat felt tight. So I'm what? Your intellectual companion? Your useful partner? Yes. At least he was honest. What if I want more than that? The word surprised her. What if I want love, not just interesting conversation? Something flickered across his face. Not quite emotion, but close. Love is a luxury, a risk. It makes people vulnerable, irrational, destroys carefully laid plans. You're afraid of it. I'm cautious of anything I can't control. And there it was, the truth beneath the proposition. He wanted intelligence, wanted conversation, wanted a partner, but not vulnerability, not real intimacy, not the messy, uncontrollable thing that love was. You're offering me a contract, Elara said slowly, a transaction dressed as a marriage. I'm offering you honesty, respect, freedom to read, to think, to use your intelligence. How many husbands would give you that? Not many. Most would want her silent, decorative, obedient, would see her intelligence as threatening instead of valuable. But was that enough? A marriage of minds without hearts? I need to think about this. She stood. Really think. Not just accept because my family needs me to. The Duke rose as well, that controlled mask slipping slightly. You're considering refusing. I'm considering what I actually want, for the first time in my life. And what do you want, Elara? The question hit like a punch. What did she want? She'd spent so long being useful, being necessary, being the solution to everyone else's problems. What did she want? I don't know. The admission felt like defeat, but I'm going to figure it out. She moved toward the door, paused at the threshold. One question. Yes? If I refuse, if I walk away from this engagement, what happens to my family? His face was unreadable. The offer stands only as a package. You accept, I clear your family's debts. You refuse, the debts remain. So they lose everything. Yes. The cage door closed with a quiet click. Elara left the library, left Ashford Hall, left the Duke standing among his thousands of books. And she understood, finally, the full weight of what was being asked. Not just her future, her choice, herself. In exchange for her family's survival, the decision came to her at 3 a.m, staring at the water-stained ceiling of her attic room. She couldn't marry him. Not like this. Not as some intellectual curiosity, some solution to his loneliness problem. But she also couldn't let her family drown, so she'd do what she'd always done. Find the impossible middle ground and make it work. The plan formed slowly, each piece clicking into place with the cold precision she'd learned from years of financial juggling. It was audacious, possibly insane, but it was the only path she could see that didn't require her to choose between herself and everyone she'd ever protected. She'd give the Duke what he wanted, just not directly. Morning light was filtering through the grimy window when she finally went downstairs. Her mother was already awake, sitting at the breakfast table with the haunted look of someone who'd stopped sleeping weeks ago. "I'll do it," Elara said without preamble. "I'll marry him." Relief flooded her mother's face so completely it was almost painful to witness. "Thank heaven. I knew you'd see reason. You've always been the sensible on one condition." The relief froze mid-expression. "Condition? Elara, you're hardly in a position to—" "He wants intelligence, wit, genuine conversation." Elara pulled out a chair, sat down with more confidence than she felt. "I'll give him that, but not in person. Not yet." Her mother's confusion was visible. "What are you talking about?" "Letters." The word hung in the air between them. "I'll write to him, as Callista." The silence that followed was so complete, Elara could hear the clock ticking in the hall. "You've lost your mind." Her mother's voice was barely a whisper. "Have I? Think about it. He proposed to me because of one conversation, one dinner where I showed him the kind of mind he wanted. But he barely knows me. Doesn't know if that was a fluke, if I can sustain that level of discourse." Elara leaned forward. "Letters let me control the narrative. Show him brilliance consistently. Build the connection he wants." "But why Callista's name?" "Because he proposed to the wrong sister, and everyone knows it." The words came out harder than intended. "Society's already whispering, questioning. If I write as myself, it just confirms their assumptions, that I trapped him somehow, manipulated him. But if the brilliant letters come from Callista—" She let the implication hang. Her mother was processing. Elara could see it. The social calculation happening behind her eyes. If he falls for Callista through the letters, then the marriage makes sense. The beautiful sister with the beautiful mind. Society stops questioning. The scandal dies. Elara kept her voice steady. "And once they're properly engaged, once everything's settled, I can step back, disappear. You keep the money, Callista gets the Duke, and I—" "You what?" "Freedom." The word blazed in her mind, but she didn't say it. "I find my own path. This is deception." Her mother's face had gone pale. "If he discovers it, he won't. Callista can manage in-person meetings. She's charming, graceful. I'll coach her on what to say when philosophy comes up. The letters do the heavy lifting." Elara pulled out the household ledger she'd brought down, flipped it open to show the brutal reality of their numbers. "We have maybe 6 weeks before the creditors move. This buys us time. Buys us everything." The ledger sat between them like evidence at a trial. "And if it works?" her mother asked quietly. "If he actually falls for this version of Callista?" "Then everyone gets what they want. You get security. Callista gets a Duke. He gets the brilliant wife he thinks he's marrying, and I get to stop being the sacrifice on everyone else's altar." The kitchen door creaked. Both women turned to find Callista standing there in her nightdress, hair loose around her shoulders, looking younger than her 19 years. "I heard everything." Her voice was small. "And it's insane. Callie, I can't do it." Callista moved into the room, sat heavily. "I can't pretend to be you. to have read the things you've read, understand the things you understand. He'll know. One real conversation, and he'll know. Then we make sure the letters count for more than conversations. Elara reached across the table, grabbed her sister's hand. Listen to me. You're brilliant at performance. That's your gift. You read people, know what they want to see, give it to them perfectly. This is just another performance. But the content? I'll write it, every word. You just have to deliver it with confidence when you see him. We'll practice. I'll prepare you for every possible question he might ask. Callista looked at their joined hands, then up at Elara's face. Why are you doing this? Really? You could just marry him yourself. Have everything. Because I don't want to be an intellectual curiosity, a problem solved. Elara's throat felt tight. I want to be chosen for real, or not chosen at all. And this way at least I get to choose something for myself. The lie tasted like ash. But what was one more deception in a life built on them? If this works, Callista's voice dropped to barely audible. If I marry him because of your words, what does that make me? A duchess, their mother cut in, her decision clearly made. And what does it matter whose words they are? The result is what counts. Elara wanted to argue, to say it mattered enormously. But her mother wasn't wrong. In their world, results were everything. Method was just details. So we're doing this. Callista said it like a eulogy. Deceiving one of the most powerful men in England. We're surviving, Elara corrected, like we always do. The three Vance women sat in the kitchen as dawn broke fully and made a pact that would either save them or destroy them completely. There was no middle ground anymore. But the first letter took Elara 6 hours to write. She sat in her attic room with paper she'd stolen from her mother's desk. Good paper, the kind they saved for important correspondence, and tried to channel every intelligent thought she'd ever had into elegant prose. Your Grace, too formal. She crossed it out. Started again. I find myself haunted by our dinner conversation. Your words about power and narrative have lodged in my mind like a splinter. Better. She kept going, letting the words flow. Discussing Milton, yes, but moving beyond. Touching on Locke's theories of consciousness. On the gap between how society defined worth and what actually created value. She wrote about books she'd read in secret, ideas she'd never been allowed to voice. It was the most honest thing she'd ever written, and it would carry her sister's name. The irony wasn't lost on her. By the time she finished, her hand ached and the sun was setting. She read it over 3 times, made minor adjustments, then copied it out in her best hand. Not her natural writing, she'd practiced Callista's rounder, more feminine script until she could replicate it perfectly. The final step was the hardest. She signed her sister's name at the bottom with a flourish Callista would never have used, but that fit the confident voice of the letter. Yours in curiosity, Callista Vance. It's beautiful. Callista appeared in the doorway, making Elara jump. Truly, I could never write like that. You don't have to. Elara folded the letter carefully. You just have to own it when he mentions it. And if he asks me about Locke, say you're still forming your thoughts, ask him what he thinks. Men love explaining things. Elara sealed the letter with wax, pressed their family seal into it. The letters establish the connection. You maintain it in person through charm and carefully timed questions. Callista took the letter, held it like it might explode. This feels wrong. Everything about our situation is wrong. This is just survival dressed differently. Her sister left to have the letter delivered, and Elara sat in the growing darkness, feeling the weight of what she'd started. There was no going back now. The lie was in motion. The Duke's response arrived 2 days later. Elara opened it in the privacy of her room, hands shaking slightly. His handwriting was precise, controlled, like everything about him. Miss Vance, your letter was unexpected. Delightful, but unexpected. I confess I had thought our dinner conversation a fortunate coincidence, a moment of genuine connection in a sea of performance. To discover it was not an accident, but rather a glimpse of a truly exceptional mind is intriguing, You write of consciousness and worth. Allow me to pose a question. If identity is constructed through social recognition, as Locke suggests, what becomes of those who are systematically denied recognition? Are they ontologically incomplete, or is there a self that exists independent of external validation? I suspect you have thoughts on this. Yours an intellectual partnership, Ashford Elara read it 4 times. He'd taken the bait, engaged with the ideas, but that question, it felt personal, pointed, like he was testing something. Or maybe she was paranoid. She spent another evening crafting a response, this one even more carefully constructed. She wrote about the violence of erasure, about how systematic denial of recognition wasn't just a philosophical problem, but a lived reality. She wrote about servants who became invisible, about women whose intelligence was dismissed, about people who existed in the margins of society's vision. She wrote about herself without saying so. The self exists regardless of recognition, but recognition determines whether that self has power, agency, meaning in the social sphere. So the question becomes, is it enough to exist, or must one be seen? I find myself uncertain of the answer. Again, Callista's signature. Again, the seal and the sending. This time, the Duke's response came within a day. And so it began. A correspondence that grew more intense, more intimate with each exchange. The Duke wrote about philosophy, politics, the loneliness of power. Elara responded with arguments that challenged him, ideas that surprised him, honesty that apparently no one else gave him. The letters piled up, 1 a day, then 2, rapid exchanges that felt less like correspondence and more like conversation. But it was all a lie. And Elara felt the weight of that lie growing heavier with each perfectly crafted paragraph. 3 weeks into the deception, the Duke requested a visit. He wants to see me. Callista stood in Elara's doorway, the invitation trembling in her hand. Tomorrow, tea at Ashford Hall, just the 2 of us. Elara's stomach dropped. We knew this would happen. Knowing it and doing it are different things. Callista moved into the room, sank onto the bed. What if I can't do it? What if he asks something and I freeze? You won't. Elara grabbed her notes. Pages and pages of talking points she'd prepared for exactly this moment. We're going to practice. Every possible question, every philosophical thread from the letters. By tomorrow, you'll be ready. They worked through the night. Elara playing the Duke, firing questions about Locke and Rousseau and Milton. Callista fumbling at first, then slowly finding her rhythm. She was good at this, Elara realized. Not at the philosophy itself, but at performing understanding. At saying just enough to sound knowledgeable without revealing ignorance. What if he wants to discuss something we haven't covered? Callista asked as dawn approached. Redirect. Ask him to elaborate on his position first. Use phrases like, I'm still formulating my thoughts, or I'd value your perspective before I commit to mine. Elara squeezed her sister's hand. You're charming. Use that. The letters prove the mind. You just need to maintain the illusion in person. Illusion. That's all this was. A carefully constructed performance designed to deceive. Callista left for Ashford Hall the next afternoon wearing her best dress. The one Elara had mended 3 times and altered to stay current. She looked beautiful, nervous, but beautiful. Elara watched from the window as the carriage pulled away and felt something twist in her chest. This should have been her. Should have been her visiting the Duke, having tea, discussing the letters she'd actually written. Instead, she was the puppet master hiding in the attic. The hours crawled. Elara tried to work on household accounts, but couldn't focus. Tried to read, but the words blurred. Finally, she just sat at the window and waited. Callista returned as the sun was setting, her face flushed and her eyes bright. How did it go? Elara met her at the door. I think it went well. Callista pulled off her gloves, moved into the drawing room. He asked about consciousness. I used the redirect you taught me, asked about his interpretation of personal identity. It worked. He talked for 20 minutes. And he held my hand. Callista's voice was strange. When he was helping me into the carriage, he held my hand and said I was remarkable. The twist in Elara's chest tightened into something sharp and painful. That's good. She forced the words out. That means it's working. Elara. Callista turned to face her fully. He kissed me. The room tilted. It was brief, respectful, but he kissed me, and he said the letters had made him feel less alone. Callista's expression was complicated. Triumph and guilt and something else. He's falling for me. For the person he thinks I am. The person Elara had created. The brilliant, witty, philosophical woman who existed only in carefully crafted letters. That's the goal. Elara heard her voice from very far away. Keep him interested. Keep him engaged. Are you angry? No. Yes, she was furious and heartbroken, and she had no right to be either. This is what we planned. You're doing perfectly. Callista studied her face. You're lying. I'm fine. You're in love with him. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Elara wanted to deny it, but the words stuck in her throat. Was she? She'd never even had a real conversation with the Duke outside that first dinner. Everything else had been letters, her words with his responses. A connection built entirely in her imagination. It doesn't matter what I feel, Elara finally said. This isn't about feelings. It's about survival. Maybe it should be about feelings. Callista's voice was quiet. Maybe we're all so busy surviving that we forget to actually live. There was no good answer to that, so Elara said nothing, and her sister left her alone with the truth she didn't want to face. She was in love with a man who was falling for someone else. Someone who wore her sister's face and spoke Elara's words. A chimera. A ghost. And she'd created it herself. The letters continued. More frequent now, more intimate. The Duke wrote about his childhood, about the pressure of inheriting so young, about how exhausting it was to always be performing. Elara responded with equal vulnerability, writing things she'd never told anyone, except she signed Callista's name to every confession. A month into the deception, her mother pulled her aside. He's asked permission to formally court Callista. Lady Minerva's face was radiant. With clear intent to propose within weeks. We've done it, Elara. We've actually done it. Victory tasted like ashes. What about the debts? Elara kept her voice practical. He's already begun clearing them. Paid the butcher, the baker, 3 months back rent to the landlord. Her mother actually laughed. A sound Elara hadn't heard in years. We're saved, all of us. Saved. They were saved, and all it had cost was Elara's words. Her thoughts, her carefully constructed persona handed to her sister like borrowed jewelry. There's to be a ball, her mother continued, at Ashford Hall. He wants to introduce Callista formally to society as his intended. It's perfect. Society will see them together, see how well matched they are. I need air. Elara pushed past her mother, out into the garden. The roses were blooming despite their neglect. Stubborn things, surviving when they shouldn't. Elara sank onto the bench near the back wall and let herself shake. This was what she'd wanted. The plan was working. Callista would marry the Duke, the family would be saved, and Elara would be free to, what? Fade away? Disappear into some governess position where her intelligence would be wasted teaching spoiled children? You're crying. Elara looked up to find Callista standing there, holding another letter. The Duke's seal gleamed in the fading light. I'm fine. Stop saying that when it's obviously not true. Callista sat beside her, held out the letter. Read it. It's addressed to you. It's addressed to a person who doesn't exist. Callista's voice was sharp. Read it. Elara took the letter with numb fingers, broke the seal. Read. My dearest Callista, I find myself in unfamiliar territory. For years I've prided myself on control. Of my emotions, my circumstances, my future. I believed myself immune to the irrationality of genuine feeling. I was wrong. Your letters have undone something in me. Not broken it, but opened it. You write with such honesty, such brilliant vulnerability that I find myself wanting to match it, to be seen by you as clearly as I see you through your words. This terrifies me. I built walls for good reason. But you've slipped through them like water, and I don't know how to shore them up again. Worse, I don't want to. The ball will be a performance for others. But perhaps afterward we might have a moment alone. There's something I need to say that I cannot commit to paper. Yours, in ways I'm still learning to articulate, Ashford. The letter shook in Elara's hands. This wasn't courtship. This was love. Real, messy, vulnerable love directed at a person who didn't exist. He's going to propose, Callista said quietly. At the ball. That's what he wants to say. I know. To me. He's going to propose to me, and I'm going to say yes, and we're going to build a marriage on lies. Callista took the letter back. Does that bother you? It should bother you. It does. Her sister stared at the Duke's careful handwriting. Every day. But what choice do we have? Walk away now? Let everything collapse? Tell him the truth and watch him hate all of us? There were no good choices. There never had been. The ball is in 3 days. Callista stood. You need to prepare me. Everything he might say. Everything I need to respond. Perfect performance, or this all falls apart. She left Elara alone in the garden with the roses and the gathering darkness. 3 days. In 3 days, Callista would stand beside the Duke at a ball in front of all of society. She'd dance with him, charm him, accept his proposal. And Elara would watch from the shadows as her words, her mind, her carefully constructed connection was claimed by someone else, the invisible daughter, invisible again. But this time, she'd made herself disappear. The night before the ball, Elara wrote her last letter. She didn't plan to, but the words came anyway, urgent and desperate. A confession disguised as philosophy. What is the greater deception, to lie outright, or to tell the truth in a way designed to be misunderstood? If identity is performed, as we've discussed, can any version of self be called false? Or is every presentation of self a kind of fiction? I think about masks, how sometimes they reveal more than faces, how the things we hide are often the most true parts of us. If someone built a version of themselves entirely from honesty but dressed it in another's name, would that be authenticity or its opposite? I'm asking for a reason. I'm asking because... She stopped, stared at the unfinished sentence. This was madness. She couldn't tell him, couldn't destroy everything they'd built on the edge of success. But she also couldn't keep lying. Elara crumpled the letter, threw it in the empty fireplace, started over. Your Grace, thank you for your letter. It moved me more than I can express. I look forward to our conversation at the ball. Until then, Callista safe, meaningless. The kind of response that revealed nothing. She sealed it, sent it off, and spent the rest of the night staring at her ceiling, wondering what truth was worth when survival depended on lies. The ball at Ashford Hall was everything their world represented: wealth, power, and performance elevated to art form. Elara arrived with her mother and Callista, wearing a borrowed dress that had been altered so many times the seams barely held. She was supposed to fade into the background, another invisible wallflower. That was the role. But the moment they entered the ballroom, the Duke's eyes found hers. Not Callista's. Hers. He stood across the room in perfect evening dress, surrounded by London's elite, and his gray eyes locked onto Elara's face with an intensity that stopped her breath. For 3 heartbeats, they stared at each other. Then Callista moved, drawing his attention, and the moment shattered. He greeted them formally, bowed to her mother, took Callista's hand and brought it to his lips, a gesture that made the watching crowd murmur approval. Miss Vance? His voice was warm. You look radiant. Callista smiled perfectly. Your Grace, your home is magnificent. Standard responses. Social script. The dance began. Elara faded to the edges of the ballroom, watching as the Duke led Callista onto the floor for the first waltz. They moved together well, Callista's grace compensating for whatever conversational gaps might exist. They looked right together, beautiful, powerful, matched. Everything a Duke and his future Duchess should be. They make a lovely couple. Elara turned to find an older gentleman standing beside her, watching the dancers with shrewd eyes. Yes. She agreed because there was no other answer. Strange, though, the courtship. The man, Lord Something, she'd forgotten his title, sipped his champagne. He pursued the elder sister first, then switched. One wonders what changed. Danger. Elara felt it like ice down her spine. Perhaps he simply found a better match. Perhaps. But the man's eyes were calculating. Or perhaps there's more to the story than we're being told. He drifted away before Elara could respond, leaving her with the cold certainty that their deception wasn't as airtight as they'd believed. Society was watching, questioning, looking for cracks in the narrative. The waltz ended. Another began. Elara watched Callista laugh at something the Duke said, watched him smile, really smile, in response. She'd done this. Created this connection, this relationship, this lie. And now she had to watch it become permanent. "Miss Elara!" She turned to find the Duke himself standing there, hand extended, not toward Callista, toward her. "Would you honor me with this dance?" The ballroom went silent. Every eye in the room fixed on them, the Duke, the forgotten sister, the breach of social protocol so obvious it felt like violence. Elara looked past him to where Callista stood, her sister's face a mask of confusion and rising panic. Looked at her mother, whose expression screamed refusal. Then she looked back at the Duke, and saw something in his gray eyes that made her heart stop. Knowledge. He knew. Her voice came out rough. "I don't think... one dance." His hand remained extended. Surely that's not too much to ask. It was everything to ask. It was exposing the lie in front of everyone. It was dangerous and stupid and... Elara placed her hand in his. The waltz began, and he pulled her onto the floor with confident authority. His hand settled at her waist, warmed through the thin fabric of her borrowed dress. They began to move, and the ballroom faded into background noise. "You write beautifully." His voice was low, meant only for her. Such intelligence, such vulnerability. Elara's pulse hammered. "I don't know what you..." The handwriting was good. Nearly perfect, but there were small inconsistencies. A letter formed slightly differently here, a spacing issue there. His gray eyes bored into hers. "I'm very observant, Miss Elara. It's why I'm successful." The floor seemed to drop away beneath her feet. "When did you know?" The words escaped before she could stop them. "The third letter, I suspected. The fifth, I was certain." He turned her smoothly through the waltz. "Did you really think I wouldn't recognize the mind from our dinner conversation? The same arguments, the same turn of phrase. It was you that night. You in every letter after." Elara couldn't breathe. "Then why did I let it continue?" Something almost like anger flashed across his face. "Because I wanted to see how far you'd go, how long you'd lie, how deep the deception ran. We needed... I know what you needed. Money, security, survival." His grip tightened slightly at her waist. "I also know you chose to deceive me rather than trust me with the truth, that you built an elaborate fraud rather than..." He stopped himself. "Rather than what?" The music swelled around them. The Duke's jaw was tight, his careful control cracking at the edges. "Rather than be honest about what you wanted." His voice dropped to barely audible. "I would have given you everything, partnership, respect, freedom, but you didn't trust me enough to ask for it. You created a puppet instead." The accusation landed like a physical blow. "What happens now?" Elara forced the words out. "Now?" The Duke's smile was sharp as broken glass. "Now I expose you. Tell everyone exactly what you've done. Humiliate your family so thoroughly that no one in society will ever receive you again." The music ended. He released her, stepped back, and Elara saw her entire world collapsing in his gray eyes. Then he turned to face the watching crowd and raised his voice to carry across the ballroom. "Ladies and gentlemen, I have an announcement to make." "My man." The ballroom held its breath. Every face turned toward them, the Duke of Ashford standing at the center of his domain, and Elara Vance frozen beside him like a prisoner awaiting execution. She could feel Callista's panic from across the floor, could see her mother's face draining of color. This was it. The end. He would destroy them in front of everyone, and there would be no recovery. No second chances. The Duke's voice carried across the silent room with absolute authority. I have been engaged in a correspondence of remarkable depth and intelligence over these past weeks. Letters that have challenged me, delighted me, and ultimately convinced me that I had found something exceedingly rare. Elara's legs felt weak. He was going to do it. Actually do it. These letters were signed by Miss Callista Vance. He paused, and the silence was suffocating. And they represent some of the finest philosophical discourse I've encountered in years. The crowd murmured approval. Callista's face was rigid with forced composure. However, the Duke's gray eyes found Elara's again, and something unreadable flickered there. I must confess that tonight has revealed to me something far more valuable than intellectual compatibility. He turned fully toward Elara, and she felt the weight of 200 pairs of eyes following his gaze. Miss Elara Vance has demonstrated a quality I value above all else: the courage to fight for those she loves, even at cost to herself, the intelligence to solve impossible problems, and the integrity to shoulder burdens that others refuse to carry. What was he doing? Therefore, I am withdrawing my suit of Miss Callista Vance. The announcement hit like a thunderclap. Gasps erupted across the ballroom, and I am instead asking Miss Elara Vance to do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife. The world stopped spinning. That is, if she'll have me. He held out his hand, and his carefully controlled face finally showed real emotion, vulnerability mixed with something that might have been hope. Despite my rather dramatic method of proposal, Elara stared at his extended hand, at his face, at the entire ballroom full of aristocrats, watching her with expressions ranging from shock to scandalized fascination. He hadn't exposed her, hadn't destroyed her family. Instead, he'd publicly claimed her, the overlooked daughter, the invisible one, in front of everyone who mattered. Her voice wouldn't work properly. I don't understand. Then let me be clear. The Duke stepped closer, his voice dropping so only she could hear. You lied to me, deceived me, built an elaborate fraud, and I'm furious about it. His jaw tightened. But I also understand why. Desperation drives us to impossible choices. I've made enough of them myself. You said you'd expose us. I said a lot of things. I was angry. His gray eyes held hers. I still am, but I'm also many other things. Impressed by your audacity, intrigued by your mind, and unwilling to let you disappear back into the shadows when you're the most interesting person I've ever met. Even though I lied? Especially because you lied. A bitter smile crossed his face. At least deception requires courage. Most people just tell me what they think I want to hear. You went to extraordinary lengths to avoid marrying me yourself while still saving your family. That's either brilliance or insanity, and I find myself captivated either way. The ballroom was starting to murmur, speculation rippling through the crowd like fire. What about Callista? Elara's eyes found her sister across the floor. You're humiliating her in front of everyone. Your sister will be fine. She's charming enough to spin this as a narrow escape from an eccentric duke. His hand remained extended. But you haven't answered my question. Will you marry me, Elara Vance, knowing that I know exactly what you did, knowing that we'll be starting this partnership with broken trust and anger and absolutely no illusions? It was possibly the worst proposal in history, brutal honesty wrapped in public spectacle. And somehow, it was also the most real thing anyone had ever offered her. Yes. The word came out before she could overthink it. Yes, I'll marry you. His smile was complicated, relief and triumph and residual anger all mixed together. He took her hand, raised it to his lips in a gesture that made the crowd erupt into applause. But Elara barely heard it. She was too busy watching her mother's face crumble into confusion, watching Callista's expression shift from panic to something that might have been relief or resentment, or both. She'd just agreed to marry a man she barely knew, who was furious with her, who knew all her worst qualities. And somehow, it felt more honest than anything that had come before. The carriage ride home was silent as a tomb. Elara sat beside her mother, Callista across from them, and no one spoke. The Duke had insisted on seeing them home personally, but he'd ridden his horse alongside the carriage rather than join them inside, a pointed statement about the distance between them now. Her mother finally broke the silence as they pulled up to Vance's house. What have you done? Secured our future. Elara's voice came out steadier than she felt. Isn't that what you wanted? I wanted Callista married to a duke. I wanted respectability, not whatever scene you just created. Lady Minerva's hand shook. Do you have any idea how that looked? Him switching sisters publicly like we're commodities at market? We are commodities. Elara met her mother's eyes. We have been for years. I just made sure we got a better price. The slap came fast, snapping Elara's head to the side, harder than the first time. Hard enough to leave a mark. You selfish, stupid girl. Her mother's voice was venomous. You've made us the scandal of the season. The family that tried to trap a duke with lies. Do you think society will forgive that? They'll forget once the wedding happens. Elara tasted blood where her teeth had cut her lip. Money erases scandal. You taught me that. Mother, stop. Callista spoke for the first time. Elara did what we asked. This isn't her fault. Isn't it? Their mother turned on Callista. You would have been a duchess. Beautiful, adored, perfect. Instead, she's stolen it from you. I gave it to her. Callista's voice was quiet but firm. The letters were hers. The mind he fell for was hers. She was always the right choice. Lady Minerva looked between her daughters like she didn't recognize either of them. Then she climbed out of the carriage without another word, disappearing into the house. Callista moved to sit beside Elara, took her sister's hand. Your lip is bleeding. It's fine. Nothing about this is fine. Callista pulled out a handkerchief, pressed it gently to Elara's mouth. But maybe it can become fine, eventually. Are you angry? Elara had to ask. That he chose me? Angry? No. Callista's smile was complicated. Relieved, honestly. I didn't want to spend my life pretending to be someone I'm not. Being charming is exhausting enough without adding philosophy to it. She paused. But I am worried. About you. He knows you lied, Elara. He knows everything. That's not a good foundation for a marriage. What marriage has a good foundation in our world? Elara pulled the handkerchief away, examined the blood on it. They're all transactions. At least ours will be honest about it. Will it be honest? Callista's eyes searched her face. Or will you just be trading one cage for another? The question lingered as they climbed out of the carriage. The Duke still sat on his horse in their crumbling courtyard, watching them with that same intense, unreadable expression. Miss Vance, he addressed Callista first, formal and distant. I apologize for any embarrassment I may have caused you this evening. No apology necessary, Your Grace. Callista curtsied perfectly. I believe we both dodged a rather complicated situation. A flicker of amusement crossed his face. Indeed. Then his eyes shifted to Elara. Might I have a word? Privately? Callista squeezed Elara's hand once, then retreated into the house. The Duke dismounted, handed his reins to his footman, and waited. Elara approached him slowly, hyper-aware of the servants watching from the carriage, of the curtains twitching in her neighbors' windows. This would be all over London by morning. Walk with me. It wasn't a request. They moved toward the garden, overgrown and neglected but private. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of roses gone wild. You're bleeding. The Duke stopped beside the garden bench, turned to face her. His hand rose toward her face, then stopped, hanging in the air between them. May I? Elara nodded, not trusting her voice. His touch was surprisingly gentle as he examined her split lip. Your mother doesn't approve of you. No, she never has. Why? Because I remind her of my father. And he's dead, so loving me feels like betrayal. The honesty surprised her. Or maybe she just sees everything I've given up to keep them afloat. And guilt looks like resentment. The Duke's jaw tightened. She struck you. It's not the first time. It will be the last. His voice went cold in a way that was almost frightening. Once we're married, you're under my protection. If anyone, including your mother, raises a hand to you again, they'll answer to me. Elara felt something crack open in her chest. No one had ever protected her before. She'd always been the one doing the protecting. Why are you doing this? The question burst out. Really, you could have any woman in England, beautiful, accomplished, without the baggage of deception and debt. Why choose me? Because you're the only one who's ever surprised me. He stepped back, putting careful distance between them. The only one who's ever challenged me. The only one who made me feel less alone. His expression hardened. You also lied to me for weeks, manipulated me, made me fall for someone who didn't exist. She did exist. Elara's voice was fierce. Every word in those letters was real. My thoughts, my feelings, my ideas. The only lie was whose name was signed at the bottom. That's not a small lie, Elara. I know. She met his eyes. And I'm sorry, truly, but I was desperate, and desperation makes us do terrible things. Yes. Something bleak crossed his face. It does. They stood in the darkness of the garden, two people who barely knew each other, bound together by necessity and anger and something neither was ready to name. I want to be clear about expectations. The Duke's voice went formal, controlled again. This marriage is still a partnership, intellectual, practical. I'll provide for you, clear your family's debts, give you freedom to read and learn and be yourself. In exchange, you'll manage my household, represent me in society, and eventually provide heirs. But not love. But not love. He agreed. I don't trust you enough for that. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The words hurt more than Elara expected, but at least they were honest. When do you want the wedding? She kept her voice steady. 3 weeks, enough time for the banns, for society to adjust to the scandal. We'll marry quietly, then leave London for my northern estate. Let gossip die down in our absence. 3 weeks. Elara tried to imagine it. 3 weeks until she left everything she'd ever known. 3 weeks until she became the Duchess of Ashford, a title she'd never wanted, earned through deception she'd orchestrated. Unless you've changed your mind. The Duke's voice held a challenge. You can refuse, walk away. I won't hold you to an acceptance given under pressure. And my family's debts will remain. His eyes were hard. I'm not a monster, Elara, but I'm also not a charity. If you choose to end this, you face the consequences. The cage door swung open, offering freedom. Freedom to lose everything. Freedom to watch her family crumble. Freedom at a price she couldn't afford. I haven't changed my mind. Elara lifted her chin. 3 weeks. We'll marry. Very well. The Duke moved toward his horse, then paused. One more thing. The letters. Do you still have them? My responses? Yes. All of them. Burn them. What? Burn them. His voice was flat. They're evidence of my vulnerability, my stupidity in believing your deception. I won't have them existing as proof of how thoroughly you fooled me. The request felt like violence. Those letters were the only real thing between them, the only honest connection they'd built. They're mine too. Elara's voice shook. My words, my thoughts. You want me to destroy the only proof that I'm more than what people see? Yes. No compromise in his tone. Burn them, or the engagement ends. It was a test, a punishment, a way to hurt her the way she'd hurt him. Elara wanted to refuse, wanted to tell him he had no right to demand this, but she'd already lost so much, already sacrificed so much of herself. What was one more piece? Fine. The word tasted like ash. I'll burn them. Good. The Duke mounted his horse. I'll send my solicitor tomorrow to finalize the settlements. And Elara? Yes? Don't lie to me again, ever. Next time I won't be so forgiving. He rode off into the darkness, leaving her alone in the garden with the roses and the weight of everything she'd lost and gained in one brutal evening. She burned the letters at dawn, every single one, his elegant handwriting turning to ash in the fireplace of her attic room. Weeks of correspondence, months of connection, the only evidence that someone had once seen her mind as valuable, all of it smoke. Callista found her sitting in front of the dying fire, staring at the remains. He made you destroy them. It wasn't a question. It was my choice. Was it? Callista sat beside her on the floor. What kind of partnership begins with forced destruction? The kind built on broken trust. Elara stirred the ashes with the poker. He's angry. He has a right to be. He's punishing you. Maybe I deserve it. Do you? Callista grabbed her sister's hand, forced Elara to look at her. We made the choice together. Mother, me, you. We all chose the deception. But he's only punishing you. Because I'm the one marrying him. Because you're the one who won't fight back. Callista's grip tightened. You've spent your whole life accepting punishment for other people's choices. Mother's, mine, father's when he died and left us in debt. When does it stop, Elara? When do you get to be angry? The question hit something deep and dangerous inside her. Because Callista was right. She was angry, furious actually, at her mother for the slap, at Callista for letting her take the fall, at the Duke for his cruel test with the letters, at herself for always choosing other people over her own needs. It doesn't matter. Elara pulled her hand free. In 3 weeks, I'll be a duchess. I'll have money, status, access to every book ever written. That's more than most women get. But will you have yourself? Callista stood. Or will you have burned that too? She left Elara alone with the ashes and the question neither of them could answer. The next 2 weeks were a nightmare of preparation. The Duke's solicitor arrived with papers, settlements, contracts, legal documents that transferred ownership of Elara from her mother to her future husband. She signed them all with numb fingers, watching as her autonomy became ink on parchment. The debts were cleared, every single one. The butcher paid, the landlord settled, 3 years of accumulated desperation erased with the Duke's money. Her mother's face transformed from perpetual anxiety to something almost like happiness, but she still wouldn't look at Elara. You're a duchess now, Lady Minerva said at once while supervising the packing of Elara's meager possessions. Or will be. Try to remember that. Try to be graceful about it. Graceful. Elara folded another threadbare shift into the trunk. Like Callista? Your sister has her own path now. Her mother's voice was clipped. Lord Bennington has expressed interest. A viscount. Good family. She'll do well. Because I cleared our debts. Because we all played our parts. Her mother finally looked at her, and her eyes were hard. Don't pretend you're some martyr, Elara. You wanted this. Wanted to prove you were smarter than Callista. This is just you winning. The accusation was so wrong and so accurate simultaneously that Elara couldn't find words to refute it. Had she wanted this? Part of her? The part that had written those letters, that had poured her intelligence and passion into every word. Had that part secretly hoped the Duke would discover the truth? That he'd choose her? Maybe winning and losing looked the same from certain angles. The wedding dress arrived a week before the ceremony. Not white. That was for virgins marrying for love. This was pearl gray silk, elegant and expensive and utterly impersonal. It fit perfectly because the Duke had sent his own modiste with Elara's measurements. She'd been fitted, pinned, measured, and assessed like a doll. You look beautiful. Callista appeared in the doorway of Elara's room, already half empty of her few possessions. I look expensive. Elara turned in the mirror. There's a difference. He's sending a carriage tomorrow to take you to Ashford Hall. You'll stay there until the wedding. Callista's voice was careful. Says it's more appropriate than you remaining here. He means he doesn't want me near Mother. Elara started unbuttoning the dress. Afraid she'll damage the merchandise. Elara, help me with this. She couldn't reach the buttons at her back. Please. Callista moved behind her, gentle fingers working the pearl buttons free. Have you seen him since that night? No. His solicitor handles everything. I'm marrying a stranger, Callie. A brilliant, angry stranger who sees me as some kind of puzzle he hasn't solved yet. Maybe that's better than being seen as something simple. Callista finished the last button. At least you're interesting to him. Until I stop being interesting, then what? Neither of them had an answer. Down. Ashford Hall at night was less intimidating than during the day. Softer somehow, with lamplight glowing in windows and the shadows hiding the overwhelming scale of wealth. Elara arrived with her single trunk, escorted by silent servants to a guest room that was larger than her entire attic at home. The bed alone could have held 4 people. The carpet was thick enough to lose things in. Everything screamed money in a way that felt almost aggressive. His Grace requests your presence in the library. A maid appeared, curtsied. If you're not too fatigued from travel. She was exhausted, but refusing felt dangerous, like failing some test she didn't know she was taking. Of course. The walk through Ashford Hall revealed rooms she hadn't seen before. A music room with a pianoforte that probably cost more than her family's house. A conservatory filled with exotic plants. A gallery hung with paintings by masters she'd only read about. This would be hers soon. All of it. The thought felt surreal. The library looked the same as she remembered. Walls of books. The smell of leather and paper. The window overlooking gardens she'd barely glimpsed. And the Duke standing by that window, still and controlled as a statue. Miss Vance. He didn't turn. Thank you for coming. Your Grace? The formality felt ridiculous. They were supposed to marry in 3 days. I thought we should talk, before the wedding. He finally turned, and his face was unreadable. Make certain we understand each other. I understand perfectly. This is a transaction, partnership without intimacy, respect without trust. Elara kept her voice steady. You've been very clear. Have I? He moved toward her, stopping close enough that she could see the gray flecks in his eyes. Because I'm not sure I've been clear at all. Then clarify. I'm angry with you. The words were measured. Deeply, persistently angry. You lied to me, made me vulnerable, made me hope for something real, then revealed it was manipulation. I know. But his jaw tightened. I'm also aware that I created the conditions for your desperation. I arrived at your home shopping for a wife like I'd shop for livestock. I dismissed you initially because you weren't conventionally beautiful. I played the game too, Elara, just with different pieces. The admission surprised her. Are you apologizing? I'm acknowledging complexity. He stepped back. We both made choices. Both have reasons and regrets. This marriage will be what we make it. It can be cold and transactional, or it can be something else. What else could it be? I don't know yet. His voice dropped. But I'd like the chance to find out, without lies between us. Elara felt something shift in her chest. Hope, maybe, or just the exhaustion of being angry all the time. No more lies, she agreed, but you have to promise the same, no tests, no punishments disguised as requests. If you're angry, say so. If you want something, ask, clearly. Fair. He held out his hand. Partners, then, honest ones. She took his hand, felt the warmth of it, the strength. Partners. There's something else. He didn't release her hand. About the wedding night. Elara's stomach dropped. They hadn't discussed this. She'd been trying not to think about it. I know the expectations. His voice was careful. Society requires consummation. But given the circumstances, the lack of trust between us, I thought we might wait. Until we're ready, both of us. Relief flooded through her so completely it was almost embarrassing. Thank you. Don't thank me for basic decency. Something almost like humor crossed his face. Though I suppose in our world, decency is rare enough to merit gratitude. In any world. Elara squeezed his hand once, then released it. Can I ask you something? Yes. Why did you really propose to me? Not the public reason. The real one. The Duke was quiet for a long moment, his expression complex. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw in a way she'd never heard. Because I've been alone my entire life. Surrounded by people, but fundamentally alone. And your letters, your real self in those letters, made me feel less alone for the first time. He met her eyes. I'm willing to risk a lot to not lose that feeling, even trust a woman who deceived me. The honesty of it stole her breath. I was alone too. Elara's voice came out rough. In the attic, managing everything, fixing everything, never asking for anything because that wasn't my role. Your letters were the first time someone valued my mind instead of just my usefulness. Then perhaps we're both recovering from loneliness." The Duke's smile was bitter. "Not the romantic foundation marriages are supposed to have." "No," Elara agreed, "but maybe more honest than most." They stood in the library surrounded by thousands of books, two people trying to build something real from the wreckage of deception. It wasn't love, it wasn't trust, but it was a beginning. And sometimes, beginning was enough. The wedding morning arrived cold and gray, rain streaking the windows of Ashford Hall. Elara woke alone in the massive guest bed, her wedding dress hanging like a ghost on the wardrobe door. 3 hours until the ceremony. 3 hours until she became someone new. The Duchess of Ashford, wife to a man who knew all her worst qualities and had chosen her anyway. A knock at the door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. "Come in." Callista entered, looking beautiful in rose silk. Behind her, impossibly, their mother. "Mother insisted on coming." Callista's tone was apologetic. "To see you wed properly." Lady Minerva stood in the doorway, her face a careful mask of propriety. "You look pale. You need rouge. Not good morning. Not, how are you feeling? Just criticism disguised as concern." "I'm fine." Elara stood, pulling her dressing gown tighter. "You didn't have to come." "You're my daughter. Of course I came." Her mother moved into the room, assessing everything with sharp eyes. "This is quite lavish. He's spending a fortune on you. He's wealthy." Elara kept her voice neutral. "That's what wealth does." "Don't be glib." Her mother's voice sharpened. "You have an opportunity here. A chance to secure our family's position permanently. Don't ruin it with your stubbornness or your pride." "Ruin it how, exactly?" "By being yourself." The words landed like a slap, even though her mother's hand stayed at her side. "By forgetting that you're playing a role. The devoted wife. The graceful duchess. Whatever you actually feel about him, about this marriage, keep it hidden. That's how women survive." Callista made a sound of protest, but Lady Minerva ignored her. "I've been married, Elara. I know what it is. Performance and duty and swallowing your own needs for the sake of security. You'll learn." Her mother moved to the window, stared out at the rain. "Or you'll be miserable. Either way, you'll be wealthy." "Is that what you want for me?" Elara's voice was quiet. "Wealth and misery? I want you to be realistic. Love is a luxury. You've secured survival for all of us. Be grateful for that." The door opened again before Elara could respond. A maid entered, curtsied. "His Grace's mother has arrived. She wishes to meet Miss Vance before the ceremony." Elara's stomach dropped. The Duke's mother. He'd never mentioned her, never talked about his family. She'd assumed. "Show her in," Lady Minerva answered before Elara could. "Hurry up, fix your hair." The woman who entered was elderly but formidable, wrapped in black silk despite the occasion. Her eyes were the same storm gray as her son's, but colder, assessing. "So," the Dowager Duchess's voice was cut glass, "you're the girl who deceived my son." No preamble, no courtesy, just accusation. "Mother," the Duke appeared behind her, his face tight with displeasure. "I said you weren't to harass her." "I'm not harassing. I'm assessing." The Dowager moved closer to Elara, studying her like a scientist examined specimens. Plain, clever, apparently, desperate enough to commit fraud. Her lips thinned. "You're everything I warned him against. That's enough." The Duke's voice went cold. "Elara is going to be my wife, your Duchess. You will treat her with respect, or you will leave." "Respect?" His mother laughed, a sharp sound. "She trapped you with lies, manipulated you into—" "She did what she had to survive." The Duke moved to stand beside Elara, a physical statement. "Something you've never had to understand. You've been wealthy and protected your entire life. She's been managing a crumbling household, supporting a family in debt, with no help and no options. So yes, she lied. I don't like it, but I understand it." The dowager's face went hard. You're making a mistake. Then it's mine to make. He took Elara's hand, his grip warm and firm. We have a wedding to prepare for. Please excuse us. He pulled Elara toward the door, past his shocked mother, past Lady Minerva's calculating expression, past Callista's worried face, out into the hallway where the walls were lined with portraits of Ashford ancestors, all judging, all watching. I'm sorry, he finally said once they were alone. She wasn't supposed to come. I specifically told her, it's fine. Elara's voice was steadier than she felt. She's not wrong. I did deceive you. So did every other woman who's ever tried to catch a husband. The only difference is you were honest about your desperation. He released her hand, ran his own through his hair, a rare break in his composure. My mother never forgave me for existing. I killed my father when I was born. Complicated labor, he died of heart failure while she was screaming. She's blamed me for 34 years. The confession landed between them like something precious and broken. I'm sorry, Elara said quietly. That's an impossible burden. We all carry impossible things. His gray eyes met hers. That's why I recognized it in you. In your letters, the weight of surviving despite everything. They stood in the hallway lined with dead Ashfords, two people about to bind themselves together despite anger and broken trust and families who didn't understand them. Are we making a mistake? Elara had to ask. Your mother thinks so, mine thinks so, everyone thinks so. Probably. A bitter smile crossed his face. But I've found that the things everyone agrees on are usually wrong. So perhaps we're brilliant instead of foolish. Or we're both? That too. A clock chimed somewhere in the house. 2 hours until the ceremony. I should finish preparing, Elara said. Yes, but he didn't move. Elara? Yes? I meant what I said, about partnership, about trying. His voice dropped. I know I've been cold, punishing, but I want this to work, whatever this becomes. So do I. He nodded once, then left her standing among the portraits, alone with the ancestors and her racing thoughts, and the certainty that she was about to marry someone as damaged and desperate as herself. It should have been terrifying. Instead, it felt almost like hope. Imam. The ceremony was small, immediate family only, which meant the Duke's bitter mother, Elara's resentful mother, Callista trying to hold everything together, and a handful of servants as witnesses. No grand society affair. No celebration. Just a vicar reading words that bound two strangers together legally and irrevocably. Elara stood in her gray silk dress and repeated vows she barely heard. The Duke's voice was steady, controlled, revealing nothing. When it came time to kiss, he pressed his lips to hers briefly. A formality, nothing more. You may present the Duchess of Ashford, the vicar announced. Duchess. The title felt foreign, wrong, like clothing that didn't fit properly. They signed the register, accepted cold congratulations from their mothers, both women looking like they'd attended a funeral rather than a wedding. Callista hugged Elara fiercely, whispering, "Be brave," in her ear. Then it was over. Done. Elara Vance ceased to exist, replaced by someone new. The wedding breakfast was tense and brief. The Dowager Duchess made cutting remarks disguised as concern. Lady Minerva matched her, the two women engaging in subtle warfare across the table. The Duke's jaw got tighter with each exchange. Finally, he stood. We're leaving. Leaving? His mother's eyebrows rose. The breakfast isn't finished. It is now. He held out his hand to Elara. We're going north, to Blackmore Estate. We'll be gone 6 months at least. 6 months? Lady Minerva looked stricken. But Elara, surely you'll visit... No. The Duke's voice was flat. My wife needs distance from London, from gossip, from family who can't be civil. His gray eyes swept both mothers. Perhaps by the time we return, you'll have learned some grace. He pulled Elara from the room before anyone could respond. Through the halls of Ashford Hall, out to where a carriage waited, already loaded with trunks. We're really leaving? Elara asked as he handed her into the carriage. Now? Now. He climbed in beside her. Unless you object? Did she? Leaving London meant leaving everything familiar, leaving Callista, leaving the wreckage of her old life, going to some northern estate she'd never seen with a man who was essentially a stranger. I don't object. She settled into the seat. Get me away from here. The carriage lurched into motion. Through the windows, Elara watched Ashford Hall recede, then London itself as they headed north, everything she'd ever known falling away behind them. Blackmore is different from here, the Duke said after an hour of silence. Harsher, remote. The weather's brutal, the land unforgiving. Most of my peers hate it. And you? I prefer it. Reality over prettiness, honesty over performance. He looked at her. I thought you might too. Why? Because you're done performing, aren't you? Done being invisible and useful and everything everyone else needed you to be. The words hit something deep. Yes? Good. His expression was unreadable. Because at Blackmore, there's no one to perform for, just us, just the truth of what we are. And what are we? I don't know yet, he admitted. But we're going to find out. The carriage rolled north through gray rain, carrying a duchess who'd been born a daughter and a duke who'd never learned to trust. Two people fleeing their pasts, driving toward an uncertain future. Behind them, London erupted into scandal. The Duke of Ashford married the wrong sister. The forgotten daughter caught herself a duke through deception. The Vance family's fraud exposed and somehow rewarded. The gossip sheets would feast on it for months. But Elara didn't know that yet. Didn't know that her mother would dine out on the story for years, transforming it from scandal to strategy. Didn't know that Callista would marry her viscount within the season and live happily performing the role she was born for. Didn't know that the Duke's mother would spread vicious rumors for years, trying to destroy her son's marriage from a distance. All she knew was the rain on the carriage windows, the man sitting across from her with storm-gray eyes, and the words that echoed in her mind. Just us. Just the truth of what we are. She'd spent her whole life being what others needed. Useful, invisible, self-sacrificing. Now she was going somewhere that would strip all that away, somewhere harsh and real and unforgiving. Somewhere she might finally discover who she actually was beneath all the performance, if she survived it. Blackmore Estate revealed itself through rain and mist on the third day of travel, a fortress of gray stone rising from moorland that stretched endlessly in every direction. No gardens, no ornamental gates, just raw landscape and a house built to withstand it. It's not welcoming, the Duke said as their carriage struggled up the final approach. I should have warned you. I don't need welcoming. Elara pressed her face to the window, watching the desolate beauty roll past. I need honest. The house was massive but austere. No gilt, no excessive decoration. Just solid stone and narrow windows, and the sense that this place had been standing against wind and weather for centuries and would continue standing long after they were gone. The staff assembled to greet them looked different too. Harder, less polished than the London servants. A housekeeper with severe features and suspicious eyes. A steward who assessed Elara like she was a problem he'd have to solve. Groundskeepers and stable hands who watched but didn't bow. Mrs. Hemlock, the Duke addressed the housekeeper. My wife, the Duchess. She'll need the mistress's chambers prepared. Already done, Your Grace. The woman's voice was neutral, but her eyes said everything. Another London wife who won't last a month here. Elara lifted her chin. Thank you, Mrs. Hemlock. I look forward to reviewing the household accounts tomorrow morning. A flicker of surprise crossed the housekeeper's face. The accounts? Yes. I assume you maintain detailed records of expenditures, staff wages, supply costs. Elara kept her tone professional. I managed my family's estate finances for years. I'd like to understand how Blackmore operates. The Duke's expression shifted, not quite a smile but close. Mrs. Hemlock looked like she'd been slapped with a fish. Of course, Your Grace. The woman's tone changed slightly. I'll have them ready. Excellent. Elara turned to the steward. And you are? Graves, Your Grace, estate steward. Mr. Graves. I'll want to tour the property, understand the land, the tenant farms, current challenges. She paused. Tomorrow afternoon, if that suits? The man blinked. You want to tour the farms? In this weather? I grew up in England, Mr. Graves. I'm aware it rains. The sharpness in her voice surprised even herself. Tomorrow afternoon. Yes, Your Grace. The staff dispersed, leaving Elara and the Duke alone in the entrance hall. He was watching her with that intense, unreadable expression. What? She asked. Nothing, just… You sounded like a duchess just then. I am a duchess. Yes. Something flickered in his gray eyes. You are. He showed her to her chambers, a suite of rooms that overlooked the moors, sparse but beautiful in their austerity. A massive bed, a writing desk by the window, shelves empty and waiting. I'll have books sent up, the Duke said. Whatever you want from the library, consider it yours. Thank you. My chambers are through there. He indicated a connecting door. For propriety's sake. But locked on your side, you control the access. The gesture wasn't lost on her. Privacy, safety, choice. I'll leave you to settle in. He moved toward the hall door, paused. Dinner is at 8, just us. No performance. No performance. She agreed. After he left, Elara stood at the window and stared out at the endless moors. This was her life now. This harsh, beautiful isolation, this stranger of a husband, this version of herself she was still learning to inhabit. The girl from the London attic felt very far away. Eek. Dinner that first night was awkward but real. They sat at opposite ends of a table that could have held 20, eating food that was simple and well prepared. No elaborate courses, no servants hovering, just two people trying to figure out how to exist in the same space. The staff don't like me, Elara said between courses. They don't know you yet. The Duke set down his wine glass. They will. Mrs. Hemlock thinks I'm another useless London wife. Probably. She's seen 3 of them come and go. Elara's fork paused halfway to her mouth. 3? Not mine, he clarified quickly. My cousins. They married London women who lasted 1 winter here before fleeing back to civilization. Now the staff assume any woman from London will fold. I'm not from London, Elara resumed eating. I'm from a crumbling house held together by desperation and pride. I can handle harsh. I believe you. He leaned back. But they'll test you anyway. See if you're real or just performing toughness. Let them test. The words came out fiercer than intended. I'm done being invisible. Done being useful only in ways that don't inconvenience anyone. If they want a duchess, they'll get one. A real smile crossed his face, the first genuine one she'd seen. Good. They finished the meal in companionable silence. Then the Duke stood, held out his hand. Walk with me? Now? It's dark. The moors are best at night. If you're not afraid. Elara took his hand. I'm not afraid of much anymore. They walked into the cold darkness, the wind fierce enough to steal breath. The Duke led her along a path that seemed invisible until they were on it, out into landscape that was all shadows and stars, and the sound of wind over stone. This is what Blackmore is, he said after they'd walked in silence for a while. Unforgiving. Beautiful if you can see it. Deadly if you're careless. Like marriage, Elara said. He laughed, a short, surprise sound. Yes, exactly like marriage. They stopped at the edge of a drop-off, the land falling away into darkness below. The estate lights were distant pinpricks behind them. I brought you here for a reason. The Duke's voice was serious now. This is the hardest place I know. Physically, emotionally. There's nowhere to hide, no society to distract, no performance that works on stone and wind. Are you trying to scare me away? No. He turned to face her fully. I'm trying to see if you'll break. Better to know now than after we've built something that collapses later. The honesty of it was brutal, and somehow perfect. I won't break. Elara met his eyes. I've been breaking and reforming myself for years. I'm good at it. So have I. His jaw tightened. My mother's hatred, my father's death, Society's expectations. I built walls so high nothing could reach me. Then you, your letters, found gaps I didn't know existed. And now you're angry that I got through. Yes. No hesitation. But I'm also grateful, even while being furious. They stood on the edge of darkness, two people admitting complicated truths. The wind howled around them, indifferent to human emotion. Can we start over? Elara asked. Not pretend the deception didn't happen, but start from here? From honesty? I don't know how to do that. Neither do I, she admitted. But we could try, together. Two people who don't know how to trust trying to build something anyway. The Duke studied her face in the darkness. Then slowly, carefully, he took her hand. Together then. His grip was warm despite the cold. But Elara, if you lie to me again even once, I won't forgive it. I can't. I understand. And she did. Trust was a fragile thing between them, already broken once. No more lies. Ever. No more lies. They walked back to the house holding hands, and something shifted between them. Not love. Not yet. But the possibility of it. A foundation being laid in harsh soil. The next morning, Mrs. Hemlock delivered the household accounts with visible reluctance. Elara spread them across the desk in her chambers and dove in. The numbers told stories, excessive spending on London imports, wages that seemed arbitrary, supplies purchased at inflated costs. 3 years of management that ranged from careless to potentially corrupt. She worked through lunch, making notes, cross-referencing entries, building a picture of systematic inefficiency. By the time Mrs. Hemlock returned to collect the ledgers, Elara had a list of questions 2 pages long. These wine purchases. Elara tapped an entry. £40 monthly for a household that barely entertains? Mrs. Hemlock's face went tight. His Grace enjoys quality wine. His Grace drinks perhaps 2 bottles weekly. Elara had watched him at dinner. This quantity suggests either significant waste or someone selling excess for personal profit. Which is it? The housekeeper's silence was answer enough. And the London meat shipments. Double the cost of local suppliers for identical quality. Elara continued down her list. The excessive candle orders, the mysteriously high soap expenditures. Shall I go on? The previous Duchess preferred London goods. Mrs. Hemlock's voice had gone defensive. The previous Duchess left 3 years ago. Elara closed the ledger with deliberate precision. These charges continued. I'm asking once, has someone been profiting from inflated orders and falsified accounts? The room went very still. Your Grace, answer honestly, Mrs. Hemlock. I can audit every entry, verify every supplier. I have time and I have motivation, but I'd rather have truth. The housekeeper's face crumbled slightly. The previous steward, Mr. Graves's predecessor, he had arrangements with suppliers. Kickbacks. By the time His Grace discovered it, the man had fled. We've been trying to correct it, but the habits remained, Elara finished. The patterns of excess that no one questioned because that's how it had always been done. Yes, Your Grace. Elara stood, moved to the window. The moors stretched away, harsh and uncompromising. She could be harsh too. Uncompromising. Here's what's going to happen. She turned back. We're switching to local suppliers exclusively. Competitive bids, verified pricing, accounts I review monthly. Staff wages will be standardized. Fair, but not exploitable. Any purchase over £5 requires my approval. Mrs. Hemlock looked stricken. Your Grace, that will be significant work. Yes, it will. Elara met her eyes. And I'll be doing most of it, because unlike the previous London wives, I actually know how to manage a household. This is what I do, Mrs. Hemlock. This is who I am. I see. The housekeeper's expression was shifting, reassessing. And the staff? There will be adjustments? Only for those who've been stealing. Elara's voice went cold. Them. I'll dismiss immediately. Everyone else keeps their position and gets a fair wage. I'm not here to punish competence, just corruption. Very good, Your Grace. After Mrs. Hemlock left, Elara sat back at the desk and let herself shake. She'd just declared war on an entrenched system. made enemies of anyone profiting from the old arrangements, claimed authority she'd never been given, just taken. It felt terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. That was impressive. She spun to find the Duke leaning in the connecting doorway, arms crossed, watching her with something like admiration. "How long have you been there?" "Long enough to hear you eviscerate my household management." He moved into the room. Mrs. Hemlock looked like she'd been struck by lightning. "Are you angry?" Elara couldn't read his expression. "I overstepped. This is your estate. It's our estate," he interrupted. "And you did exactly what I hoped you'd do, what I've been too detached to do myself. You knew about the corruption?" "Suspected. Never had proof. Never cared enough to investigate properly." He picked up one of her ledgers, scanned her notes. "I've been letting this place run itself into dysfunction because London consumed my attention. But you saw it immediately, diagnosed it, fixed it. I haven't fixed it yet. You will." He set down the ledger and his gray eyes were intense. "You're good at this. Managing chaos, finding solutions, building order from disorder. It's who you are." The words hit something deep, because he was right. This was what she did. What she'd always done. But for the first time, someone valued it. "The staff will hate me," she said quietly. "Some will. The ones stealing will definitely hate you. The honest ones will respect you." He paused. "And I'll support whatever decisions you make, publicly and completely." "Why?" Elara had to ask. "Why give me this authority?" "Because you're my duchess. Because you're brilliant at something I'm terrible at. Because—" He stopped, seeming to struggle with words. "Because I'm tired of fighting alone. And I think you are too." The admission hung between them, raw and honest. "I am tired." Elara's voice was rough. "So tired of everything being a battle, of proving I'm worth something, of fighting for scraps." "Then stop fighting alone." The Duke held out his hand. "We're partners. Remember? Let's actually be that." Elara took his hand, felt the warmth of it, the strength. "Partners. Partners." He agreed. "Now come with me. Graves is waiting to tour the tenant farms. Let's go scandalize him by actually caring about estate management." But the tenant farms were a revelation of neglect. Elara rode beside the Duke, side saddle on a horse she barely controlled, because she'd learned to ride exactly twice in her life, and watched Mr. Graves grow progressively more uncomfortable as she asked question after question. "How many tenants currently?" she shouted over the wind. 23 families, Your Grace." Graves looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "And their lease terms?" "Standard contracts. 20-year terms, renewable at our discretion." "At what rent?" "Varies by acreage and—" "Give me numbers, Mr. Graves, specific numbers." They stopped at the first farm, a modest stone house with fields that looked poorly maintained. A man emerged, weathered and suspicious, pulling a cap from his head when he saw the Duke. "Your Grace." "Thomas." The Duke dismounted. "My wife wanted to meet the tenants. May we?" The man's eyes shifted to Elara, still struggling to dismount gracefully. "Your Grace." "Thank you for receiving us." Elara finally got her feet on the ground. "Your crops look stressed. Drainage issues?" Thomas blinked. "Aye. The ditches need clearing. Been asking the estate for help 3 years running. And?" Elara looked at Graves. "It's not priority." The steward started. "Why not?" She cut him off. "If drainage fails, the crops fail. If crops fail, rent doesn't get paid. How is that not priority?" Graves had no answer. "Show me the ditches." Elara turned back to Thomas. For the next hour, she tramped through muddy fields while the Duke and Graves trailed behind. Thomas explained drainage patterns, showed her broken fencing, pointed out problems that had been ignored for years. Elara took notes in a journal she'd brought, asking questions that made Thomas's suspicious expression gradually shift to something like hope. "If we fixed the drainage, improved that fencing, cleared the north field of stones, what kind of yield increase?" she asked. 20%, maybe more," Thomas said. "But the estate won't authorize." "I authorize it," Elara said firmly. Mr. Graves will arrange work crews within the week. Your Grace, Graves started to protest. Is there a reason we shouldn't invest in our own tenants' productivity? Elara's voice went cold. A reason we'd prefer to let good land deteriorate? The cost will be offset by increased rents from improved yields. She turned to Thomas. I'm proposing a new arrangement. The estate funds the improvements. In exchange, you pay 15% increased rent, but only after the improvements prove successful. Fair? Thomas looked stunned. More than fair, Your Grace. Good. Mr. Graves will draw up the agreement. They visited 6 more farms that afternoon. At each, Elara found similar patterns: neglect, deferred maintenance, tenants who'd given up asking for help. At each, she made the same offer: estate investment in exchange for modest rent increases once productivity improved. By the time they returned to Blackmore, Graves looked like he'd been through a war. Your Grace, he stopped her as they dismounted. These agreements, they're unprecedented. The previous Duchess never involved herself with, I'm not the previous Duchess. Elara handed off her reins to a groom. I'm someone who understands that investment yields returns, that productive tenants benefit everyone. That neglect is expensive. She paused. Do you have a problem with that approach, Mr. Graves? No, Your Grace. But his tone said otherwise. Good. Because if you do, I need to know now. I won't work with a steward who fights me at every turn. The man's face tightened. I'll have the agreements prepared. He left, and Elara felt the exhaustion crash over her. She'd just restructured estate management, committed significant funds, and probably made another enemy. You're shaking. The Duke appeared beside her. I'm furious, she admitted. Years of neglect. Tenants struggling because no one cared enough to help them succeed. It's wasteful and cruel, and you're fixing it. He caught her hand. In one afternoon, you've done more for this estate than I've done in 5 years. That's not... It's true. His grip tightened. I've been absent, focused on London, on politics, on everything except the people depending on me here. You saw that immediately. Diagnosed it, started solving it. Graves hates me now. Graves is lazy. He's been coasting on minimal effort for years. Of course he hates you. You're making him work. The Duke pulled her toward the house. But the tenants don't hate you. Did you see Thomas's face? You gave him hope. Had she? Elara replayed the conversation, remembered the shift in the man's expression when she'd offered to fund improvements. I don't know what I'm doing. The admission burst out. I'm making this up as I go, hoping I don't destroy everything. Welcome to being a leader, the Duke said dryly. That's what it is. Making it up, hoping you're right, dealing with the consequences when you're wrong. You make it look effortless. I'm an excellent performer. He held the door for her. But I'm terrified most of the time, just better at hiding it. The vulnerability in his voice made her look at him, really look. And she saw it. The cracks in his armor, the exhaustion beneath the control. We're both performing, aren't we? She said quietly. Just better performances than we used to give. Maybe. He met her eyes. Or maybe we're becoming the people we perform. It's hard to tell the difference sometimes. They entered the house together, 2 people trying to figure out who they actually were beneath all the masks. The tenants might see a duchess taking charge. The staff might see a threat to established order. The Duke might see a partner finally. But Elara wasn't sure what she saw when she looked in the mirror anymore. Someone new. Someone still forming. Someone who terrified and excited her in equal measure. The changes came fast after that first week. Elara restructured the household accounts, negotiated new supplier contracts, standardized wages. She fired 2 staff members she caught stealing, a footman and an undercook, and watched the rest of the household snap to attention. She worked 16-hour days, falling into bed exhausted, waking to do it again. The Duke worked beside her, not managing, she was better at that, but supporting, backing her decisions publicly, handling the social consequences while she handled the practical ones. They developed a rhythm. Breakfast together discussing the day's plans, separate work until dinner, evening walks on the moors where they talked about everything except the growing connection between them. Because it was growing, slowly, carefully, built on respect and partnership rather than romance. They didn't touch except for necessary courtesies, didn't speak of feelings, didn't acknowledge the way their eyes found each other across rooms. But it was there, building like pressure behind a dam. 3 weeks into their Blackmore exile, a letter arrived from London. The Duke read it at breakfast, his face going carefully blank. "What is it?" Elara asked. "My mother." He set down the paper. "She's written to every member of society she knows, spreading rumors about our marriage, calling you a fraud, an opportunist, claiming I'm under some kind of spell." Elara's stomach sank. Can she do that? She's already doing it. He pushed the letter across. "Read it." The words were vicious, calculated attacks on Elara's character, her intelligence, her worth, painting her as a conniving villain who'd trapped a naive duke, every sentence designed to destroy. "She wants me gone." Elara's voice was flat. "Wants you to annul the marriage, send me away in disgrace." "Yes." "Will you?" The Duke looked at her like she'd suggested burning down the house. "Do you honestly think, after everything, that I'd let her manipulate me into abandoning you?" "I don't know what I think anymore." He stood, moved around the table, pulled her to her feet. "Then let me be clear. My mother is toxic. She's been poisoning everything around me for 34 years. I will not let her poison this. But the scandal? Scandals fade, our marriage remains." His hands gripped her shoulders. "You're my Duchess, my partner, the person who's transforming my neglected estate into something functional. You think I'd give that up because of my mother's venom? She could destroy my reputation. Your reputation in London? Among people who already thought you were unmarriageable?" His smile was sharp. "Let her try. Meanwhile, you're here making a real difference. Which matters more?" The question hung between them. London's opinion versus Blackmore's reality. Performance versus substance. "Here matters more," Elara said quietly. "This work matters more." "Then we ignore her. Stay here. Keep building what we're building. And if she escalates, then we deal with it." He released her shoulders but didn't step back. "Together. Because that's what partners do." Elara looked up at him. This man she'd deceived, who'd proposed out of anger and fascination, who was slowly becoming someone she couldn't imagine being without. "Thank you." The words felt inadequate. "For choosing me. Again." "I keep choosing you." His voice dropped. "Every day I choose you. Eventually you'll believe it." He left her standing in the breakfast room, and Elara felt something crack open in her chest. Something vulnerable and terrifying. She was falling for him. Actually falling, not for the idea of a duke or the security of marriage. For him. The complicated, damaged man who walked moors in darkness and defended her against his own mother. It should have been terrifying. Instead, it felt like coming home. The winter hit Blackmore with brutal force. Snow buried the roads. Wind howled through every crack. The cold was vicious, the kind that got into bones and stayed there. Half the London servants the Duke had brought fled back to civilization within a month. Elara stayed, worked harder. Spent mornings reviewing accounts with frozen fingers, afternoons checking on tenants, making sure they had supplies, fuel, food. Evenings strategizing improvements with the Duke and Graves, who had slowly, grudgingly, started to respect her. The Northfield drainage is complete. She marked it on the estate map one evening. "Thomas says his winter wheat already looks better." "Cost?" the Duke asked. "Under budget. Turns out local labor is both cheaper and better than London contractors." She smiled at Graves. "Who would have thought?" The steward almost smiled back. "Your Grace has a point." "Your Grace has many points," the Duke said dryly. "Mr. Graves has just been too stubborn to admit it until now." "I admit it," Graves said. "These improvements are working, the tenants are happier, productivity is measurably up, and your Grace—" He looked at Elara directly. "You were right. About all of it." The acknowledgement felt like victory. After Graves left, the Duke poured 2 glasses of whiskey and handed one to Elara. "To my brilliant wife." He raised his glass. "Who's accomplished in 3 months what I couldn't in 5 years. "To partnership," Elara corrected. I couldn't have done any of this without your support. They drank, the whiskey burning warm down her throat. There's something I need to say. The Duke set down his glass. Something I've been avoiding. Elara's heart stuttered. What? I'm not angry anymore. He met her eyes. About the deception, the letters, all of it. I've been holding on to that anger like armor, but it's gone. You've proven yourself 100 times over, proven that the person in those letters was real. I'm still the same person who lied to you. Yes, and I'm the person who arrived at your house shopping for a wife like livestock. We've both done things we regret. He moved closer. But we've also built something real here, something that works. And I don't want to keep punishing you for the past when the present is... He stopped, seeming to struggle for words. Is what? Elara prompted. Is the first time I've been happy. The confession came out rough. Maybe ever. This partnership, these evenings talking about estate management and philosophy, watching you take charge and transform everything. I'm happy, Elara, and I didn't think I was capable of that. Tears burned her eyes. I'm happy too. Terrified and exhausted and constantly afraid I'm about to fail, but happy. Then maybe we stop pretending this is just a partnership. His hand rose to her face, gentle. Maybe we admit it's becoming something else. Like what? Like a real marriage, with trust and respect and... He stopped. And love? Elara whispered. Yes. His thumb brushed her cheek. And love, if you want that, if I haven't destroyed the possibility with my anger and distance. You haven't destroyed anything. Elara's hand covered his. You've been honest, real, more real than anyone I've ever known. Then can we try? His gray eyes were vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. Actually try to build something beyond partnership? Something that includes all of it? Yes. The word came out certain. Yes, I want that. He kissed her then, soft at first, careful. Then deeper as she responded, her hands fisting in his coat, pulling him closer. It was nothing like the brief formality at their wedding. This was real, raw, full of months of building tension. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, the Duke rested his forehead against hers. I should go. His voice was rough. We should do this properly, slowly. Properly is overrated. Elara was surprised by her own boldness. We've never done anything properly. Why start now? A real smile crossed his face. Fair point. He kissed her again, and this time neither of them held back. Months of dancing around each other, of building respect and partnership and something deeper. All of it crystallizing into this moment. When he scooped her up and carried her toward the connecting door between their chambers, Elara didn't protest. When he laid her on his bed, their bed now, with careful reverence, she pulled him down to her. They made love like people who'd been starving, urgent and messy and real. No performance, no pretending, just two complicated people finally being honest about what they wanted. Afterward, lying tangled together in darkness, the Duke traced patterns on her shoulder. I'm still figuring out how to do this, he said quietly. How to be vulnerable, trust someone, love someone. So am I. Elara turned to face him. But we can figure it out together. Together. He pulled her closer. I'm starting to really like that word. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, finally letting themselves have what they'd been building toward. The storm howled outside, but inside Blackmore, two people had found unexpected warmth. Spring came late to Blackmore, but when it arrived, it transformed everything. The moors exploded with color. The tenant farms flourished with Elara's improvements. The household ran with efficiency it hadn't seen in decades. And the Duke and Duchess of Ashford became something London society had never seen, actual partners who liked each other. News of the changes spread. Other estates started asking about Elara's methods. Tenants from neighboring properties inquired about transferring. The local gentry, initially suspicious, began inviting them to dinners where Elara's intelligence was valued rather than feared. You've become notorious, the Duke said one morning at breakfast. The Duchess, who actually works. Notorious sounds bad. Notorious sounds interesting. He handed her a letter. This came from the Agricultural Society. They want you to speak about tenant management reforms. Elara read the invitation, stunned. They want me to speak publicly? Well, apparently your methods are revolutionary. Who knew treating tenants like humans instead of resources would be controversial? Will you come? To the speech? Elara? He took her hand. I'll be in the front row, publicly supporting my brilliant wife shocking society with common sense. The speech happened a month later. A room full of estate owners and managers, mostly men, mostly skeptical. Elara stood at the front in her best dress and laid out everything she'd done. The numbers, the results, the philosophy behind treating tenants as partners rather than servants. The room was silent when she finished. Then someone started clapping. Others joined. Within minutes, the entire room was on their feet applauding. The Duke caught her afterward, pulled her into an embrace that scandalized half the attendees. You're magnificent, he said against her hair. Absolutely magnificent. I was terrified. You were perfect. He pulled back to look at her. Do you know what you've done? You've changed how people think about estate management, changed what a duchess can be. I just applied basic logic, which is revolutionary in our world. He kissed her, not caring who was watching. I'm proud of you, so damn proud. Elara felt something settle in her chest. Recognition. Not for being useful or convenient or decorative. For being herself. For doing work that mattered. They returned to Blackmore that evening to find a letter waiting. From Callista. Dearest Elara, London has finally stopped talking about your scandalous marriage. Mostly because they're too busy being scandalized by your success. Word of your estate reforms has reached every drawing room. Mother is torn between being horrified that you're working and being smug that you're famous. I married Lord Bennington last month. It's pleasant enough. He's kind, boring, and doesn't expect much from me beyond smiling prettily. It's exactly what I was raised for, but I think about you often, about how you chose differently, how you refused to just be decorative, how you're actually making a difference. I'm proud of you, sister, and perhaps a little jealous. Write to me. Tell me about Blackmore and your stern duke who turned out to be wonderful. Love always. Callista Elara read the letter twice, then handed it to the duke. Your sister sounds happy, he said after reading it. She sounds settled, Elara corrected. There's a difference. Do you regret it? Not having that kind of life? The easy performance? Elara looked around Blackmore. The harsh beauty of it, the work she'd done, the life she'd built. Looked at the man beside her who'd become her partner in every sense. No, she said firmly. No regrets. This is harder, messier, more complicated. But it's real. It's mine. Ours. I choose this. The Duke pulled her close. Good. Because I choose this too. Choose you every time. They stood together in their entrance hall. The Duchess who'd transformed from invisible daughter to undeniable force, and the Duke who'd learned to trust despite every reason not to. Two people who'd built something real from the ruins of deception. Outside, the moors stretched away in the gathering darkness, harsh and beautiful and unforgiving. Just like them. Just like the life they'd chosen together. Just like the life they'd chosen together. The summons from London arrived on the first anniversary of their wedding. Not a request. A summons. From the Queen herself, demanding the Duke and Duchess of Ashford attend the autumn season. Parliament was convening. The Duke's presence was required, and society apparently was dying to see what had become of the scandalous marriage that had shocked them all a year ago. We don't have to go, the Duke said, reading the royal letter with visible distaste. I can claim estate business. And insult the Queen? Elara looked up from the tenant report she'd been reviewing. That seems unwise. I don't care about insulting the Queen. I care about you having to face my mother again. Face all of them. I'm not the same person who left London. Elara stood, moved to the window overlooking the moors she'd come to love. I'm not afraid of them anymore. You should be. They'll be vicious, My mother will have spent a year poisoning every well she could find. Let them be vicious. Elara turned back to face him. We've built something real here. Changed lives. Made a difference. What can they say that matters compared to that? The Duke studied her face. You want to go. I want to face them, she corrected. Want them to see what their forgotten daughter became. Want your mother to choke on her accusations. A fierce smile crossed her face. Is that petty? Extremely. He moved toward her. I love it. They left for London a week later, taking Mrs. Hemlock and Graves with them, both to manage the London household and to serve as living proof of Blackmore's transformation. The housekeeper had gone from suspicious adversary to fierce ally. Graves had become one of Elara's strongest advocates. The city hit like a wall after a year in the north. Too many people, too much noise, air thick with smoke and performance. Elara felt it immediately, the shift back into society's theater. But she wasn't the same actor anymore. Their London house had been opened and prepared. Smaller than Ashford Hall, but still excessive by any reasonable standard. Elara walked through rooms she barely remembered, feeling like a ghost visiting her own past. Your Grace, a footman appeared, bowing. Lady Minerva Vance is here to see you. Elara's stomach tightened. Her mother. She hadn't seen her since the wedding, hadn't responded to the few letters that had arrived at Blackmore. Show her to the drawing room, Elara said. I'll be there shortly. The Duke caught her hand. Do you want me there? No, this is mine to handle. Lady Minerva looked older, grayer, but still held herself with that rigid propriety, still wore that expression of perpetual judgment. She stood when Elara entered, curtsied, a gesture that felt wrong coming from her mother. Elara, you look well. Mother. Elara didn't sit. Why are you here? To see my daughter. Is that not allowed? You slapped me the last time we spoke. Called me selfish and stupid, so forgive me for questioning your motives. Her mother flinched. I was harsh, but you were throwing away Callista's chance. I was saving the family, which I did. Your debts are cleared. Callista married well. You have everything you wanted. Elara kept her voice flat. So again, why are you here? Lady Minerva's composure cracked slightly. Because I heard what you've done at Blackmore. The tenant reforms, the household management. People are talking about you, Elara, praising you. And that bothers you. No. Her mother's voice dropped. It makes me realize how badly I failed you, how much I wasted by treating you like you were invisible. The admission hung in the air. Elara wanted to accept it, to forgive, to rebuild something, but the years of being dismissed, of being the useful daughter, of being slapped for daring to be brilliant, they didn't disappear with one confession. You didn't fail me, Elara said carefully. You made choices. You chose Callista's beauty over my intelligence, chose survival over truth, chose to make me invisible because I was inconvenient. I know. But those choices made me who I am, made me learn to fight, made me strong enough to survive Blackmore and transform it. Elara moved to the window. So I don't forgive you, Mother, but I also don't need your approval anymore. That might be the greatest gift you ever gave me. Her mother made a sound between a laugh and a sob. You've become formidable. I've become visible. There's a difference. Will you... Lady Minerva stopped, started again. Will you allow me to attend the Queen's ball as your guest? I'd like to see you triumph. Elara turned, studied her mother's face, saw the genuine request beneath the performance. One condition. You apologize to the Duke. For everything you said at our wedding. For the slap. For years of making me feel worthless. I'll do it. No hesitation. Gladly. Then, yes, you may attend. After her mother left, Elara sat in the drawing room and let herself shake. That conversation had been building for a year, and it had gone better than expected, which somehow made it worse. Because forgiveness was complicated, and Elara wasn't sure she was ready for it. The Duke found her there an hour later, staring at nothing. How bad was it? He sat beside her. Confusing. She apologized. Sort of. Acknowledged she'd been wrong. Elara leaned into his shoulder. Part of me wanted to rage at her. Part of me wanted to cry. I did neither. What did you do? Told her the truth. That I don't forgive her, but I don't need to. That her failures made me strong. Elara closed her eyes. Is that terrible? It's honest. He kissed her temple. And honesty is what we do. The Queen's ball was in 3 days. 3 days to prepare for the most important performance of Elara's life. Not because she cared what society thought, but because she cared about proving them all wrong. The dress arrived from the modiste 2 days before the ball. Not gray this time. Deep emerald silk that brought out the green in Elara's eyes, cut in the latest fashion, but modified to her specifications. Sleeves that allowed movement, a bodice that wasn't crushing, skirts that didn't require 6 women to manage. Beautiful, but functional, like everything she'd become. You look like a queen. Callista appeared in the doorway, stunning as always in rose silk. Truly, I barely recognize you. Kali? Elara turned from the mirror. When did you arrive? An hour ago. Lord Bennington is settling in downstairs. Her sister moved closer, took Elara's hands. Let me look at you. Actually look. Elara stood still while Callista studied her face. You're happy, her sister said finally. Really happy. It shows. I am. Is that strange? It's wonderful. Callista's smile was complicated. And makes me realize how unhappy I am. Not miserable, just empty. I perform my role well, but there's nothing beneath it. Kali, no, let me say this. You were right. At our last conversation in London, about me being decorative instead of functional, about having no substance. Callista's grip tightened. But you also showed me it's possible to be more, to demand more. And I'm trying. Reading the books you recommend. Asking Bennington to involve me in estate decisions. It's small, but it's something. Elara pulled her sister into an embrace. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you too. Terrified for you. The ball will be brutal, but proud. The ball. Right. Tomorrow night, Elara would walk into a room full of people who'd dismissed her, walk beside the Duke who'd shocked them all by choosing her, and prove that their judgment meant nothing, no pressure at all. The Duke found them together and smiled. The Vance sisters. Still causing trouble? Always. Callista curtsied with exaggerated formality. Your Grace, my sister tells me you've become tolerable. High praise. He moved to Elara's side, natural as breathing. Your sister undersells herself. She tells me you're attempting reform of your own marriage. Attempting being the key word. Callista's expression turned serious. I don't have her strength, her certainty. You have your own strengths, Elara said firmly. Don't compare. Just be better than you were yesterday. That's enough. After Callista left, the Duke pulled Elara close. Nervous about tomorrow? Terrified, she admitted. What if they're right? What if I'm just a fraud who got lucky? Then you're a fraud who transformed an estate, revolutionized tenant management, and gave a speech that changed how half of England thinks about agriculture. He tilted her face up. Elara, you've earned everything you have, multiple times over. They can think whatever they want. The truth remains. The truth is, I'm still the girl from the attic sometimes. Still feeling like I don't belong. Good. His voice was fierce. Stay that girl. She's the one who sees through performance, who doesn't accept limitations, who fights. He kissed her softly. Tomorrow, walk in there as that girl. Not as who they expect, as who you actually are. And if they hate me, then they're fools, and we'll go home to Blackmore and continue doing work that actually matters. The Queen's ball was everything Elara remembered, and worse. A crush of bodies in the most oppressive finery. Music too loud. Conversation too performative. The air thick with judgment and competition and barely concealed viciousness. She entered on the Duke's arm, wearing her emerald dress like armor, and felt every eye in the room fix on them. The whispering started immediately. That's her, the one who deceived him. Plain thing, isn't she? What does he see? They say she's quite radical, manages the estate herself. Shocking. Elara lifted her chin and kept walking. The Duke leaned close. Ignore them. You're magnificent. I'm being judged by people who've accomplished nothing except being born wealthy. Exactly. So their judgment is worthless. They made their way through the crowd. Some people openly stared. Others turned away, snubbing them deliberately. A few, mostly men who'd heard of her reforms, nodded with genuine respect. Then Elara saw her, the Duke's mother holding court in a corner surrounded by sycophants. The Dowager Duchess spotted them, and her face went cold and triumphant. She's been waiting for this. The Duke's jaw tightened, planning her attack. Let her attack. Elara squeezed his arm. I'm not running. They approached the Queen first. Protocol demanded it. The elderly monarch sat on a throne-like chair, watching the proceedings with shrewd eyes. Your Majesty. The Duke bowed. Elara curtsied deeply. Ashford, and this must be your controversial Duchess. The Queen's voice was sharp, but not unkind. We've heard much about you, girl. Radical reforms, public speaking, managing estates like a man. I manage estates like someone who understands basic economics, Your Majesty. Elara kept her voice respectful but firm. Gender seems irrelevant to mathematics. The Queen's eyebrows rose. Then she laughed, a genuine sound that made half the room turn. Bold. We like bold. She leaned forward slightly. Tell us, is it true you increased tenant productivity by 30% in a single year? 37%, Your Majesty, with modest investment and treating them as partners rather than servants. Fascinating. You must speak with our agricultural minister. He's been failing spectacularly at similar goals for years. The Queen waved them away. Go. Enjoy yourselves. And Duchess, ignore the vipers. They bite, but they're not venomous. They moved away from the throne, and Elara felt the first stirring of confidence. The Queen had just publicly endorsed her. That mattered. But then the Dowager Duchess intercepted them. How lovely! Her voice dripped poison. The fraud and my deluded son. Tell me, dear, how long before he realizes his mistake? Before he tires of your provincial thinking and lack of breeding? Mother, the Duke started. No, Elara cut him off. Let her speak. I want to hear this. The Dowager's eyes gleamed. You think you've won. Think you've proven something with your little estate reforms. But you're still the girl who lied, who deceived, who trapped my son through manipulation. I did lie, Elara's voice carried, and people nearby turned to listen. I wrote letters under my sister's name because I was desperate, because my family was drowning in debt and I saw one chance at survival. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. But what I wrote was true. My thoughts, my intelligence, my arguments. The only lie was whose name signed them. Elara stepped closer to the Dowager. Your son fell for a mind. That mind was always mine. So yes, I deceived him about attribution, but the substance, the person he connected with, that was real. You're a fortune hunter, the Dowager spat. An opportunist who... I increased Blackmore's revenue by 43% in 1 year. Elara's voice went cold. I restructured household management that was hemorrhaging money. I negotiated supplier contracts that saved thousands annually. I implemented tenant reforms that have been adopted by 6 neighboring estates. She paused. What have you accomplished besides being born wealthy and bitter? The silence that followed was absolute. The Dowager's face went purple. How dare you? How dare I? How dare you? Elara's fury finally broke free. You blamed your son for your husband's death, made him carry that burden for 34 years, made him believe love was weakness, and now you're trying to destroy the first real happiness he's ever had because you can't stand seeing him escape your poison. Elara! The Duke tried to intervene, but she was past stopping. I was invisible for 23 years, the forgotten daughter, the useful one, the sacrifice no one valued, and I'm done. She looked at the watching crowd, at all the faces that had dismissed her. I'm done apologizing for being intelligent, for working, for refusing to be decorative and empty. If that makes me radical, scandalous, inappropriate, good. At least I'm real. The ballroom was silent. Then someone started clapping. Slowly at first. Then others joined. Within moments, half the room was applauding, mostly women, mostly those who'd been dismissed themselves. The Dowager Duchess fled, her face a mask of humiliation and rage. The Duke pulled Elara close, his voice rough in her ear. That was extraordinary. Possibly insane, but extraordinary. I may have just destroyed your social standing. You just saved it. He turned her to face the crowd. Look. People were approaching, not to snub, but to speak. Women introducing themselves, asking about her reforms. Men inquiring about tenant management. Even the Queen's agricultural minister requesting a meeting. You've become a symbol. Callista appeared beside them, her eyes bright. The woman who refused to stay invisible, who fought and won. I didn't win, Elara said. I just stopped losing. Sometimes that's the same thing. The rest of the evening was a blur. Conversations about estate management and women's education and reform. Introductions to people who actually valued intelligence. Invitations to speak, to advise, to collaborate. The scandal hadn't destroyed her. It had given her a platform. By the time they left, Elara was exhausted but exhilarated. She'd faced the worst society could throw at her and survived. More than survived. Thrived. In the carriage home, the Duke pulled her against him. I have something for you. He handed her a small box. Inside was a ring, not the massive diamond he'd given her at their engagement. This was simpler. A band of gold engraved with words, from shadow to power. It's our story, he said quietly. Yours especially. You started invisible. Now you're undeniable. Elara slipped the ring on beside her wedding band. Thank you for seeing me, for choosing me. For choosing us, he corrected. We built this together. They returned to Blackmore 2 weeks later, leaving London's chaos behind with genuine relief. The moors stretched away, harsh and beautiful, and Elara felt something settle in her chest. This was home now, this unforgiving landscape that demanded honesty. The estate had thrived in their absence. Graves met them with reports of successful harvests, 3 new tenant families wanting contracts, and a request from a neighboring duke to tour their operations. Word has spread, Graves said. Everyone wants to know how you did it. We did it, Elara corrected. This was never just me. With respect, Your Grace, it was always you. The steward's smile was genuine. You saw what needed fixing and fixed it. The rest of us just stopped fighting you. That evening, Elara stood at her window overlooking the moors and felt the weight of everything that had changed. A year ago, she'd arrived here as the forgotten daughter, the desperate liar, the unwanted bride. Now she was the Duchess of Ashford, a reformer, a voice people actually listened to. But more than that, she was herself. Fully, completely herself. The Duke found her there, wrapped his arms around her from behind. What are you thinking? That I'm happy, that we did something impossible, that I love you. The words came easily now. And that I'm terrified it won't last. Why wouldn't it last? Because happy things don't. Not in my experience. They get taken away. He turned her to face him. Then we'll fight to keep this. Together. Every day. Fighting for what we've built. Promise? Promise. He kissed her softly. We're partners, remember? In everything. Elara leaned into him and let herself believe it. That this could last. That she'd earned happiness and got to keep it. That the girl from the attic had finally found where she belonged. 3 years later, Elara stood in the House of Lords gallery watching her husband speak. Not about politics, about agricultural reform, about tenant rights, about the economic benefits of investing in the people who worked your land. He was quoting her research, using her data, advocating for policies she'd helped design. Beside her sat Callista, now visibly pregnant with her first child. Her sister had continued her own quiet revolution, learning, growing, pushing boundaries in her marriage. It wasn't dramatic like Elara's transformation, but it was real. He's very good, Callista whispered, using all your best arguments. They were always our arguments, Elara said. I just put them in writing first. After the speech, which was received with surprising support, they returned to their London house to find a letter waiting from the Royal Agricultural Society, inviting Elara to join as their first female member. She read it 3 times, not quite believing it. They're inviting me, actually inviting me, to be a member. Of course they are. The Duke read over her shoulder. You're the leading expert on tenant management in England. They'd be fools not to. But I'm a woman. You're the Duchess of Ashford, the woman who revolutionized estate management, the expert every landowner wants to consult. He turned her to face him. You've earned this. Multiple times over. Stop being surprised when people recognize it. That night, in their bed, Elara traced the scar on the Duke's shoulder, a riding accident from years before they'd met. Do you ever regret it? She asked. Choosing me instead of someone easier? Someone who didn't come with scandal and deception? Every day. He said it seriously enough that her heart stuttered. Then he smiled. I regret that I didn't choose you sooner, that I wasted time being angry, that I almost let pride destroy what we've built. But no regrets about the choice itself. None. Zero. Not even close. He pulled her closer. You're the best decision I ever made, even when you're impossible and stubborn and refuse to accept compliments. I'm not stubborn. You literally just proved my point. She laughed and kissed him, and they made love with the easy familiarity of people who knew each other completely, who'd seen each other at their worst and chosen to stay anyway. Later, as the Duke slept beside her, Elara stood at the window watching London's lights and thought about everything that had led here, the desperation that drove her to deception, the courage it took to keep lying, the moment it all exploded, the brutal honesty that followed, the slow building of something real. She'd started as the invisible daughter, the one no one valued, the sacrifice no one acknowledged. Now she was someone who mattered, who made a difference, who refused to accept that intelligence was shameful or ambition was unladylike or power was only for men. She'd become the woman she'd always been underneath. She'd just stopped apologizing for it. The next morning, Elara sat down and wrote her acceptance to the Royal Agricultural Society. Then she wrote to 3 other women she'd met, intelligent, capable women trapped in decorative roles, and invited them to study estate management with her. If she could transform from invisible to undeniable, so could they. The revolution she'd started at Blackmore was spreading, slowly, carefully, one woman at a time. It would take decades, maybe centuries, but change had to start somewhere. It might as well start with the girl from the attic who refused to stay hidden. 5 years after that first desperate carriage ride to Blackmore, Elara sat in the estate office reviewing reports when her steward brought unexpected news. Your Grace, there's someone here to see you. She says it's urgent. Who? A young woman, Miss Catherine Winters, says she read about your work, needs your help desperately. Elara knew that desperation. She'd lived it. Show her in. The girl who entered was young, maybe 20, and had that same haunted look Elara remembered from her own mirror. Exhausted, brilliant, trapped. Your Grace. The girl curtsied awkwardly. I'm sorry to intrude, but I didn't know where else to go. Sit. Elara gestured to a chair. Tell me. The story spilled out. A family in debt. A younger sibling who was beautiful and marriageable. This girl, overlooked, intelligent, useful, who'd been managing everything while being dismissed. It was Elara's story almost exactly. I thought, Catherine's voice shook, I thought maybe you'd understand. Maybe you'd know how to survive this. Elara studied the girl's face and saw herself 5 years ago. Desperate, brilliant, one wrong choice away from destruction. I understand, she said quietly. More than you know, and I'm going to help you. How? First, we're going to assess your actual situation, your family's debts, your options, your skills. Then we're going to find you a position, not as a wife, as a person. Estate management, perhaps, or as my assistant. Catherine's eyes widened. You'd hire me? I'd invest in you, Elara corrected, the same way someone once invested in me. Intelligence shouldn't be wasted because of gender, and desperation shouldn't force brilliant women into impossible choices. But the scandal, if I don't marry, then you'll be scandalous. Like me, like every woman who refuses to be decorative. Elara smiled. The scandal fades. Your work remains. Which matters more? The girl stared at her like she was seeing something impossible. Hope, maybe. A path that didn't require sacrifice. I want to work, Catherine said firmly. Want to use my mind, want to matter. Then you will. Elara stood. Consider yourself employed. We'll start tomorrow. After the girl left, stunned and grateful, the Duke appeared in the doorway. You're collecting strays now? I'm investing in potential. Elara moved into his arms. That girl is brilliant. Trapped. I can help her. Give her what no one gave me. A choice. You're building an army of brilliant women. Someone has to. She looked up at him. The world doesn't change by accepting limitations. It changes when people refuse them. My revolutionary duchess. He kissed her forehead. What am I going to do with you? Love me. Support me. Watch me change the world one desperate girl at a time. I can do that. 10 years after the wedding that shocked London, the Duke and Duchess of Ashford hosted the first Women's Agricultural Conference at Blackmore. 50 women attended. Estate managers, landowners in their own right, tenants who'd revolutionized their farms, women from across England and beyond, drawn by Elara's reputation and the promise that intelligence mattered more than gender. Elara stood before them and felt the weight of everything that had led here. I started as the invisible daughter, she said without preamble. The one nobody valued, the sacrifice no one acknowledged. I'm sure many of you have similar stories. Nods throughout the room. Recognition. Society told us our minds didn't matter, that intelligence was unfeminine, that ambition was shameful, that our only value was in beauty and obedience and producing heirs. More nods, some women crying quietly. We were lied to. Elara's voice strengthened. Our minds matter immensely. Our work matters. Our refusal to accept limitations matters. And every time one of us succeeds, every time one of us refuses to be decorative and insists on being functional, we make it easier for the next woman. And the next. And the next. She looked out at 50 faces watching her with hope and determination and the fierce recognition of people who'd fought similar battles. So here's what I propose. We stop fighting alone. We build a network, share knowledge, support each other, advocate for reform together. We make it impossible for society to dismiss us because we're too many, too loud, too undeniably valuable. They'll call us radicals, someone said from the back. Good, Elara smiled. Let them. Radical is just another word for refusing to accept injustice, for demanding better, for being brave enough to change things. The applause started slowly, then grew until the entire room was on its feet. Women who'd been told they didn't matter, celebrating together the fact that they did. That evening, after the formal sessions ended, Elara stood on the terrace overlooking the moors with the Duke beside her. You did it, he said quietly. Built something that will outlast us both. We did it, she corrected. I couldn't have done any of this without your support. You could have. He turned her to face him. You would have found a way. You always do. But I'm grateful I got to be part of it. Grateful enough to deal with 50 house guests. Grateful enough to deal with anything. He kissed her. Besides, watching you revolutionize society is my favorite entertainment. Elara laughed and leaned into him, watching the sun set over the moors. This harsh, beautiful place that had become home, that had stripped away every pretense and forced her to become real. She thought about the girl she'd been, invisible, desperate, willing to lie for survival, and the woman she'd become, powerful, purposeful, undeniably herself. The journey from shadow to power hadn't been clean or perfect. It had been messy and complicated and full of mistakes. She'd hurt people, made terrible choices, built things on foundations of deception. But she'd also learned, grown, fought her way into becoming someone who mattered. And now she was helping others do the same. What are you thinking? The Duke asked. That I'm grateful, Elara said honestly. For everything. The desperation that made me clever. The deception that brought us together. The anger that forced honesty. The partnership that became love. All of it. Even the hard parts? Especially the hard parts. She smiled. The hard parts made me strong enough to be here. To do this. To become who I actually am instead of who I was supposed to be. The invisible daughter who became undeniable. Something like that. Elara watched the last light fade from the sky. I wonder what she'd think. That desperate girl in the attic. If she could see where she ended up, she'd be proud, the Duke said firmly. She'd see everything she fought for come true. Maybe. Elara leaned her head on his shoulder. Or maybe she'd just be relieved she survived. They stood together on the terrace as darkness settled over Blackmore. The estate lights glowed below them. Inside, 50 women who'd refused to be invisible were planning their own revolutions. And Elara felt something she'd never thought she'd feel. Complete, not perfect. Not without complications or struggles or fights still to come, but complete. Fully herself. Undeniably real. The girl from the attic had found her power, and she'd be damned if she'd ever give it back. Years later, long after Elara was gone, historians would debate her legacy. Some would call her revolutionary. Others would claim she'd just been in the right place at the right time. A few bitter accounts would insist she'd been a fraud to the end. But the women she'd helped, the ones she'd employed, trained, supported, and inspired, they knew the truth. Elara Vance had been a girl who refused to stay invisible, who turned desperation into strategy, deception into partnership, and anger into change. Who'd looked at a world that told her she didn't matter and said, with absolute certainty, watch me. And they had watched. Society had watched. The world had watched as the forgotten daughter became the woman no one could forget. That was her legacy. Not perfection, not sainthood, just a fierce, complicated refusal to accept that intelligence had to be hidden, that ambition was shameful, that women existed only to be decorative. She'd been human, flawed, sometimes cruel in her honesty, sometimes ruthless in her determination. But she'd been real, undeniably, completely, powerfully real. And in the end, that was the only thing that mattered. The story of Elara Vance ended the way it began, with a woman standing at a window looking out at a world that had tried to erase her, and choosing instead to reshape it entirely, from shadow to power, from invisible to undeniable, from the forgotten daughter to the woman who changed everything. And if that wasn't a revolution, nothing was.